The first thing I noticed was that the cake was wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not the wrong shade of ivory or missing the sugar flowers. Ian and I had spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing. The cake the banquet staff rolled into our reception had 3 white tiers, pale blue and pink frosting around the base, and a gold topper that read, "Boy or Girl." For a few seconds, I honestly thought it belonged to another ballroom. Then my mother stepped into the middle of the dance floor, already holding the microphone, and smiled at nearly 120 people like she had just pulled off the surprise of the year. Before Erica and Ian cut the cake, she announced, "We have one more reason to celebrate tonight. Surprise. Tonight we're celebrating both my daughters." My sister Lily put both hands over her mouth. People started clapping. My father looked down at his champagne glass. I walked straight across the dance floor, took the microphone out of my mother's hand, and said, "Perfect. Then she can pay for her half." Lily's smile disappeared. She turned toward Mom so fast the earrings at her jaw swung. "Pay for what?" Before I tell you what happened after that, I hope you're doing well wherever you're listening from, because what started with one missing wedding cake turned into something I never expected to uncover about my own family. Stay with me, and if you enjoy stories where people finally stop paying for everyone else's choices, subscribe to the channel and see this one through with me. At the time, though, I wasn't thinking about family patterns or money or anything nearly that large. I was staring at my 27-year-old sister and trying to decide whether the confusion on her face was real. Lily had always been a terrible liar. She smiled too much when she was nervous, talked too fast, and added unnecessary details. Right then, she wasn't doing any of those things. She looked genuinely blindsided. Mom reached for the microphone. I moved it away before she could take it back. "Erica, honey, don't turn this into something ugly," she said quietly, still smiling for the room. That smile was one of my mother's greatest skills. "Janet Caldwell could tell you your car was on fire while making the neighbors think she was complimenting your landscaping. It was supposed to be a surprise." "It is," I said. "I'm very surprised." A few people laughed nervously. Mom did not. Ian had reached me by then. He didn't grab my arm or whisper for me to calm down. That was one of the reasons I married him. He knew I didn't need someone managing my emotions for me. He simply stood beside me and looked from the cake to my mother. Our wedding planner, Marissa, had appeared near the edge of the dance floor with the banquet captain. I could tell by her expression that this wasn't something she had scheduled. That mattered. I handed her the microphone and lowered my voice. "No additional speeches, no extra reveal activities. We go back to the reception schedule after this." Marissa nodded immediately. "Absolutely." Mom stared at me. "You're seriously going to make this difficult?" "No, I'm making it short." Lily was still standing beside her husband with one hand on her stomach. She was only about 13 weeks pregnant, barely showing unless you knew what to look for. And this was her first baby. I knew how excited she was. I also knew she had wanted a gender reveal eventually. What I had never agreed to was donating part of my wedding reception to it. I turned to her. "Do you want to know?" She blinked. "What?" "The baby. Do you want to find out now?" Her eyes went from me to Mom. "I thought you knew." That was the first moment the anger in me changed shape. "Knew what?" Mom cut in. "Lily, this is not the time." Lily ignored her. "Mom said you finally agreed. She said the bakery was covering everything, and you were okay with doing it during cake cutting because everybody would already be here." I looked at my mother. She looked right back at me. I could have stopped the reveal completely. Part of me wanted to. But then Lily's hand moved over her stomach, and I realized there were 2 separate problems standing in front of me. One was my sister, who might have accepted something she should have questioned. The other was my mother, who had apparently constructed a version of my consent and distributed it to everyone except me. I wasn't going to solve that on a dance floor surrounded by guests. I took the microphone back from Marissa. "All right, we're already here. Lily gets 1 minute. Then this goes back to being a wedding." Mom opened her mouth. "1 minute," I repeated. Ian's mouth twitched at the corner. Not because any of this was funny, but because he knew exactly what I was doing. I wasn't surrendering. I was containing damage. The banquet captain cut into the back of the gender reveal cake, while Lily and her husband stood beside it. Pink filling showed through the slice. There was cheering. Lily cried. Her husband kissed her forehead. For about 30 seconds, I let myself be happy that I was going to have a niece. Then Mom tried to step forward again with the microphone, and Marissa blocked her smoothly. "We're moving on to the couple's cake cutting and first dance sequence," she said. Mom stared at her. "There's more I wanted to say." Marissa smiled professionally. "The couple has asked us to continue with the original schedule." That was when Mom finally understood that taking the microphone back from her had not been symbolic. There was only one problem. We no longer had a wedding cake to cut. The banquet captain asked whether we wanted to cut the gender reveal cake instead. I looked at Ian. He shook his head once. "No," I said. "Serve it if people want it. We'll move on." I thought I would be more upset saying that. Instead, I felt strangely calm. The moment had already been taken. Cutting somebody else's cake and pretending it was ours wasn't going to restore it. We moved into our first dance 10 minutes early. Ian put one hand at my waist and leaned close enough that nobody else could hear him. "Do you want me to ask questions or do you want to wait?" "Wait. You sure?" "I want to enjoy my wedding before I investigate it." That got a real laugh out of him. "You married the right woman." I was about to say the same thing. For the next hour, I did exactly what I had decided to do. I danced. I talked to guests. I hugged Ian's aunt from Indianapolis, who had cried during the ceremony harder than either of our mothers. I ate dinner even though I had almost no appetite. I refused to let the strangest 10 minutes of the evening swallow everything that came before or after them. That didn't mean I stopped noticing things. My father avoided being alone with me. Douglas Caldwell had never been a man who feared awkward conversations. He had spent almost 40 years running a bakery, negotiating leases, dealing with suppliers, firing employees who stole, and arguing with customers who wanted champagne cakes at grocery store prices. Numbers did not scare my father. Conflict usually did not scare him either, as long as he thought he had the stronger position. Twice that evening, I saw him notice me coming and suddenly become very interested in someone else. The third time, I caught him near the bar. "Dad," he stopped. "Can we not do this tonight?" I asked one question. "You've asked more than one question. Then answer this one. What exactly did the bakery pay for tonight?" His expression changed so slightly most people would have missed it. "I didn't. Your mother arranged the cake." "That isn't what I asked." He lowered his voice. "Erica, this isn't the time. Was company money used?" He rubbed his thumb along the edge of his glass. "We can talk after you get back." "Back from where?" "Your honeymoon." Ian and I were leaving for a short trip the following evening. I stared at him. "You need until after my honeymoon to tell me whether a company I own part of paid for something at my wedding?" His jaw tightened. "You're making this sound worse than it is. Then answering should make it sound better." He didn't. Someone called his name from behind us, and Dad looked past me with visible relief. That was when I stopped thinking the cake was only Mom's bad decision. If Douglas was uncomfortable with a money question, there was a money problem. I let him walk away. A few minutes later, one of my cousins came over with a piece of the pink cake on a plate. "This is actually pretty good," she said. "Didn't your family bakery make your wedding cake too?" "No." She frowned. "Really? I thought that was the whole point." "What whole point?" She immediately looked embarrassed. "Nothing. Your mom said something earlier about it being nice that the family business could be part of both daughters' celebrations." Both daughters' celebrations. There it was again. Not a surprise for Lily. Not an impulsive announcement. A narrative. By the time the reception ended, I had heard some version of it from 3 different people. Mom had told relatives that Lily's reveal was a little family surprise. She told one of Ian's cousins it had been worked out in advance. She told a family friend I had been hesitant at first, but had come around. I had done no such thing. Mom approached me while Ian and I were saying goodbye to the last guests. "You're angry," she said. "I'm tired." "Erica." I looked at her. "You embarrassed your sister." I almost laughed. Interesting interpretation. She thought you knew. That part, I believe. Mom's mouth tightened. Did you tell her I agreed? I told her you wouldn't ruin this for her. That isn't the same sentence. You knew she wanted a reveal. I also knew I wanted a wedding cake. You're 39 years old. You really want to fight with your pregnant sister over dessert? There it was. The shift I knew well. Something was done to me, then my reaction became the problem. I'm not fighting with Lily. You took the microphone from me in front of everyone. I did. You could have talked to me privately. You could have asked me privately. Mom stared at me. I watched the answer form in her face before she spoke. If I had asked, you would have said no. I let the silence sit there. Then I said, that should have told you something. Ian walked up beside me with my coat over his arm. Mom looked at him, probably hoping he would soften me. He held the coat open. Ready? I am. Mom exhaled sharply. You're really leaving like this? The reception is over, Mom. That's not what I mean. I know. I put on my coat and walked out with my husband. The parking garage was cold enough that my bare shoulders tightened before Ian got the car unlocked. Late March in Columbus had spent the whole week pretending to be spring, then changed its mind by sunset. I sat in the passenger seat, kicked off my heels, and finally let my head fall back. Ian started the engine but didn't move. You okay? I will be. Do you want to know where your cake went? That made me sit up. You noticed too. I noticed there was no wedding cake at our wedding. I paid for it in full. I know. $2,400. I definitely know. Despite everything, I smiled. Then I pulled out my phone. I had an email thread with Claire, the owner of the boutique pastry studio. Months earlier, we had gone back and forth over tasting notes, frosting, delivery timing, loading dock instructions, and refrigeration requirements. The hotel had limited cold storage before dinner service, so Claire had asked for a backup logistics contact in case her delivery team ran into trouble while Marissa was tied up with the ceremony. I had given her my mother's name. At the time, it had seemed practical. Janet had worked around commercial kitchens almost her entire adult life. If anyone understood how quickly buttercream could become a problem in a warm loading area, it was her. I opened the thread and typed, Claire, quick question. Our cake never made it into the reception tonight. Can you tell me what happened with delivery? I hesitated before pressing send. Ian looked over. You don't have to solve it tonight. I'm not solving it. What are you doing? Creating a timestamp. He smiled faintly. There she is. I sent the email and put my phone away. The answer came the next morning. I woke up in our hotel suite a little after 7, with my hair still smelling faintly like hairspray and champagne. Ian was asleep beside me. My phone showed one new message from Claire. I opened it, expecting an apology about a delivery mistake. Instead, I read the email twice. Then, a third time, Claire wrote that the cake had been completed on schedule and left the studio just after 4 in the afternoon. Her driver had called the backup logistics contact when he was told there might be an issue with the hotel's refrigeration timing. According to the delivery notes, Janet Caldwell instructed him to reroute the cake to Caldwell Bakehouse, where it would be held in refrigerated storage until further instruction. Claire had attached the delivery confirmation. There was my cake. There was the address of my parents' bakery. There was the time. And beneath it was the note from the driver. Rerouted per Janet Caldwell. Authorized backup logistics contact. I stared at the screen until the words stopped looking like English. This had not happened because my mother got excited at my reception. She had moved my wedding cake hours before I ever walked into that ballroom, which meant the surprise had started long before she picked up the microphone. I read Claire's email one more time before waking Ian. The sentence that bothered me most wasn't the part about the reroute. It was the phrase authorized backup logistics contact, because technically, that part was true. I had given Mom that authority myself. Months earlier, Claire had asked for someone who could make a quick decision if her delivery driver hit a problem with the hotel loading dock or refrigeration window. Marissa, our wedding planner, would be tied up with the ceremony. Ian's mother lived out of state and knew nothing about commercial kitchens. Mom had spent most of her adult life around pastry racks, delivery vans, walk-in refrigerators, and buttercream that could collapse if someone left it near a heating vent. Putting her name down had felt like common sense. What I had authorized was help getting my wedding cake safely into the hotel. I had not authorized her to remove it from my wedding. Ian was awake by the time I finished reading the attached delivery note. He rolled onto his side, looked at my face, and said, "That bad?" She rerouted it. He sat up. "Your mom?" 4:23 yesterday afternoon, driver called her. She told him there was a refrigeration issue and sent the cake to Caldwell Bakehouse. Was there a refrigeration issue? Not according to Marissa. Ian held out his hand, and I passed him the phone. He read the email without interrupting. That was another thing I appreciated about him. He never reacted for me before he had the facts. "So she planned it," he said, "at least hours ahead. Probably longer. Probably." He handed the phone back. "What do you want to do?" Our flight for the honeymoon wasn't until the following evening. We had planned one quiet day in Columbus after the wedding, partly because neither of us liked racing from a reception directly into an airport. I had pictured sleeping late, having brunch, opening a few cards, and laughing about whatever small things had gone wrong the night before. Instead, I was sitting in bed looking at a signed delivery note that proved my mother had deliberately redirected something I had paid for months earlier. "I want to see the cake," I said. Ian glanced at me. "The actual cake?" "Yes. You think it's still there?" "If Mom sent it to the bakery for refrigeration, it should be. You know, seeing it might make you angrier." "I'm already angry." That wasn't what I said. I looked at him, and he gave me the small, patient expression he used when he knew I was turning a feeling into a task list. He wasn't wrong. If there was a problem, I preferred something I could call, measure, schedule, document, or fix. Anger was harder because it didn't come with a dashboard. "I still want to see it," I said. "Then we'll go." I showered, tied my hair back, and changed into jeans and a sweater. On the drive across Columbus, I kept thinking about why I had ordered the cake from Claire in the first place. That decision had annoyed Mom from the beginning. Caldwell Bakehouse did excellent wedding cakes. I wasn't pretending otherwise. The bakery had built much of its reputation on weddings, graduations, and large family events. If I had wanted a technically perfect cake, my parents' kitchen could have made one. But nearly every milestone in my family eventually turned into something involving the bakery. Birthdays became product testing. Graduation parties became catering showcases. Christmas dinners ended with Mom asking which dessert could be adapted for the January menu. Even when we were children, Lily and I understood that family life and Caldwell Bakehouse occupied the same space. I had never hated that. In some ways, I loved it. The smell of brown butter and cinnamon still reminded me of mornings before school. Some of my best childhood memories happened sitting on flour bins while Dad counted inventory and Mom decorated cakes at 6 in the morning. But my wedding was one of the first major family events where I wanted to draw a line around a few things and say, "This part is mine." When Ian and I went cake tasting at Claire's studio the previous fall, he had looked at the estimate and raised his eyebrows. $2,400? It feeds 120. For that price, it should also perform the ceremony. I laughed so hard Claire had to leave the room for a minute. Later, when we were walking back to the car, Ian asked why I was so determined not to use Caldwell Bakehouse when my family probably would have made the cake at cost. "Because I want one thing nobody in my family gets to redesign," I told him. He stopped beside the car and studied me for a second. "That's specific?" "That's specific." He never argued again. Now, driving toward the bakery the morning after our wedding, that old conversation felt less funny. Caldwell Bakehouse's main kitchen sat behind the older of the two retail locations in a converted brick building my parents had bought when I was in college. The Sunday morning crowd was already thinning when Ian and I walked in. A few employees congratulated us. One asked why we weren't on our honeymoon yet. I smiled, thanked them, and kept moving toward the back. Mom was in the office. Of course she was. She looked up from her laptop when I walked in and immediately stiffened. "I thought you'd be sleeping." I was. Her eyes moved to Ian and back to me. "What are you doing here?" "I came for my wedding cake." For half a second, she said nothing. Then she sighed. "Erica, Where is it? It's in the walk-in. So it is here. I never said it wasn't. You also never told me it was. Mom closed the laptop. What exactly are you trying to accomplish? I'd like to start with seeing the thing I paid for. Ian stayed by the doorway. He didn't join the argument. Mom stood. Fine. We walked through the production area into the rear refrigeration room. One of the decorators glanced up as we passed, then quickly focused on a tray of pastries. Mom opened the walk-in door and flicked on the light. My cake was sitting on a steel cart against the back wall. For a moment, I didn't move. Claire had made it exactly the way Ian and I had chosen. 3 tiers covered in smooth ivory buttercream. Small sugar branches curling around one side. Tiny white blossoms instead of the heavy floral design Mom had originally suggested. The top tier had the slight asymmetry Ian liked, because he said it made the whole thing look less manufactured. Nothing was broken, nothing was missing. It was perfect, and completely useless. That sounds dramatic when I say it now. Obviously, a cake still had value as food. We could have cut it that morning. We could have taken pictures in jeans beside a stainless steel prep table and laughed about it someday. But that wasn't what we had paid for. We had paid for a moment. The room, the people, the music, the stupid little ceremonial act of standing beside each other with a knife, while our friends made jokes about not smashing frosting into each other's faces. That moment was gone. Mom mistook my silence for surrender. See? Nothing happened to it. I turned toward her. Nothing happened to it? It was stored properly. That wasn't my concern. You still have the cake. I had a wedding yesterday. And you still had a wedding yesterday? There it was. I folded my arms. Why did you move it? Mom looked toward Ian, maybe hoping his presence would force me to stay polite. I was polite. That didn't mean I was leaving without an answer. Lily wanted the reveal, Mom said. She's been anxious about the pregnancy. She wanted something joyful. She could have had a gender reveal. She wanted family there. She could have invited family. You know how hard it is to get everyone together. So you used my guest list. That is not what happened. It's exactly what happened. Mom's face tightened. You had the ceremony. You had the flowers. You had the dress. You had the first dance. You had the whole day, Erica. Lily got 5 minutes. I looked back at the cake. That's how you measured it? What? You counted how much I already had and decided there was enough to take some away. I didn't take anything away. I pointed at the cart. Mom, my wedding cake is standing in your refrigerator. She threw up her hands. And you're acting like I destroyed your marriage. No. I'm acting like I told you no. So you created a situation where my no didn't matter. You never specifically told me no to doing it during cake cutting. I stared at her. She realized what she had said about 2 seconds too late. No, I said slowly. I told you months ago that I didn't want Lily's pregnancy announcements folded into the wedding. I didn't realize I needed to provide a list of every possible method. You're twisting this. I'm simplifying it. Mom stepped closer. You're 39 years old. You have a career, a house, a husband, money, everything you've worked for. Lily is 27 and scared to death about becoming a mother. Why is it so difficult for you to let her have one happy moment? I almost answered immediately. Then I stopped, because that question was bigger than the cake. I didn't have the language for it yet, but I recognized the pattern. Lily's need always arrived in the room as an emergency. Mine arrived as an optional preference because I could survive without it. I'm not angry that Lily had a happy moment, I said. I'm angry that you decided mine was available for reassignment. Mom shook her head. You always make everything sound like a board meeting. And you always make boundaries sound like a lack of compassion. Maybe because sometimes they are. Ian shifted behind me. I knew he wanted to say something. I also knew he wouldn't, unless I asked. I looked at Mom. Who paid for the gender reveal cake? Her expression changed. Barely, but enough. The bakery made it. That isn't what I asked. It was flour and sugar, Erica. We didn't order a diamond. Who paid for the labor? Don't be ridiculous. Who paid for the decorations? The staff time? The delivery? Anything added at the hotel? Mom turned toward the walk-in door. If this is about money, talk to your father. That answer interested me more than anything else she had said. I followed her out. Dad was in the production office, already looking like a man who knew he had been volunteered for a conversation. He had a paper cup of coffee in one hand and a supplier invoice in the other. Dad. He set the paper down. Mom says I should ask you who paid for Lily's reveal. He looked past me at Janet. Really? He asked her. Mom crossed her arms. She wants accounting. I want an answer. Dad rubbed his forehead. The bakery covered it. There was that word again. Covered. What does that mean? We made the cake in house. And there were some minor expenses. Which account? He gave me a tired look. Erica, it was a few $100s. Which account? You're leaving tomorrow. That doesn't change the ledger. Mom made an irritated sound. This is exactly what I mean. Your sister found out she's having a daughter. And you're standing here asking for an account code. I turned toward her. Because you told Lily the bakery was paying. I own 34% of the bakery. I'm allowed to know what that sentence means. Dad looked at Mom, then back at me. I'll send you the detail. When? Today. I'd appreciate that. Mom stared at me as if I had pulled out a subpoena. I didn't care. Ian and I left without taking the cake. Claire later arranged for it to be portioned and packaged so we could send some to relatives and freeze the top tier. I paid her original invoice in full because Claire had done exactly what she was hired to do. I didn't blame her driver either. He had called the person I had authorized to solve delivery problems. My mother had simply turned that practical authority into something I had never intended. We stopped for coffee on the way back to the hotel. Ian waited until we were sitting before he said anything. You were quiet in there. I was trying not to say something I couldn't take back. Did it work? Mostly. He smiled. I stirred my coffee, even though I hadn't put anything in it. She really believes it. What? That because I already had a good wedding. Taking one part of it shouldn't matter. Ian leaned back. Do you think this is still about the wedding? I don't know. That was the honest answer. I knew Mom could be invasive. I knew she had always made excuses for Lily that she would never have made for me. But I had never thought of Caldwell Bakehouse as part of that pattern. Business had always been different. Dad believed in numbers. I had ownership documents. We had an operating agreement. There were books, rules, percentages, quarterly summaries. Family emotions were messy. Accounting wasn't supposed to be. That afternoon, Dad sent me a PDF. No apology. No explanation. Just a short email. Here is the March transaction detail you requested. I opened it on my laptop while Ian packed. The gender reveal itself was easy to find. Cake ingredients. Decor supplies. A few hours of production labor. Delivery expense. A small hotel service charge that had been reimbursed through the bakery. None of those numbers shocked me. What shocked me was the category. Promotional event. Underneath it was a project code. Caldwell Beginnings. I read it twice. I had never heard those words before. I owned 34% of Caldwell Bakehouse. I received quarterly management summaries. Anything large enough to have its own project name should at least have sounded familiar. I searched the PDF. There were 4 more entries tied to the same project code. Brand photography. Social content equipment. Event development. Brand support. Lily Caldwell. That last one was several $1,000s. I clicked into the supporting detail. The description made no sense. Residential deposit support. I sat back. Ian zipped his suitcase and looked over. What? I don't know yet. What does that mean? I turned the laptop toward him. My parents' bakery paid part of Lily's apartment deposit. He read the line, then looked at me. Why? That's a very good question. I scrolled up and looked again at the words Caldwell Beginnings. Until that morning, I thought I was trying to figure out why my mother had replaced my wedding cake. By that afternoon, I had a different question. What exactly had my family been using my company to pay for? The first thing I did was not call my mother. That probably says more about me than anything else I could tell you. I had a PDF open on my laptop showing that Caldwell Bakehouse had paid part of my sister's apartment deposit. And instead of driving across town demanding answers, I made a folder. I downloaded the March detail Dad had sent me, saved Claire's delivery email, exported the wedding vendor schedule, and created a running list of every question I did not yet have an answer to. Ian watched me do it from the edge of the hotel bed while pretending not to watch me do it. "You know we're supposed to leave for our honeymoon tomorrow," he said. "I know. And you know the bakery will still exist when we get back." "I know. And you're creating a spreadsheet." "It's not a spreadsheet yet." That sounded defensive. "It's a document." "That's much more romantic." I looked at him, and he grinned. Ian knew better than to tell me to relax. Relax had never been a useful instruction for me. If something was wrong, I wanted to know what was wrong, what evidence existed, who had authority, and what could be done without making the problem worse. I had built most of my professional life around exactly that instinct. At 39, I was a senior operations director for a regional healthcare services company. My job was not glamorous. Nobody made television shows about fixing staffing workflows, vendor failures, budget overruns, compliance gaps, or why 3 departments had somehow bought the same software without talking to one another. But I was good at seeing where a system said one thing and behaved another way. The problem was that families did not come with clean process maps. Caldwell Bakehouse came closer than most families did, because it was also an actual business. I owned 34% of it. That did not mean I ran it. I want to be clear about that, because later, more than one person asked me some version of the same question. How could you own a third of a company and not know what was happening inside it? The answer was simple. I was a non-managing member. Dad and Mom handled ordinary operations. They hired people, approved routine expenses, managed vendors, reviewed schedules, handled purchasing, dealt with the banks on day-to-day matters, and made the hundreds of small decisions required to keep 2 bakery locations and a catering operation functioning. I received quarterly management summaries, year-end financials, tax documents, and material notices. If something crossed certain thresholds, I had approval rights. If I wanted to inspect records, I could, but I did not sit in their office every Tuesday looking through grocery invoices and petty cash. I also had my own career. For years, that arrangement had seemed healthy. 4 years earlier, it had seemed smart. Back then, Caldwell Bakehouse had been in trouble for a reason that had nothing to do with Lily. My parents had opened a second location too aggressively. The build-out cost more than expected. The neighborhood took longer to develop, and supply prices climbed at the exact wrong time. The original bakery was profitable. The catering side was solid. But cash got tight enough that Dad called me one evening and asked if I would look at the numbers. Not lend him money. Look at the numbers. That distinction mattered to me. I was 35 then. I had already spent years working in operations, and I had enough experience to know that loving a business and understanding its cash cycle were not the same thing. I told Dad I would review the financials if he gave me everything, not a cleaned-up family version. He agreed. I hired an advisor with my own money. That irritated Mom immediately. "You don't trust your father?" she asked. "I trust Dad. I don't make 6-figure decisions on trust. It's a family business. It's still a business." That was when Mom made the comment I remembered years later with much more weight than it had carried at the time. Only Erica could turn helping her parents into 20 pages of paperwork. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. The advisor did not find a dying company. He found a viable business that had stretched itself too thin. The second location needed time. The old one was still producing good margins. Catering had growth potential. Debt was manageable if cash stabilized. So I made an investment, $180,000. Not a gift, not a desperate bailout. An investment. I used accumulated savings, bonus money, and proceeds from selling a portion of vested company stock I had received through my employer. In exchange, I received 34% of the LLC, information rights, and approval rights over certain major decisions. I knew the risk. I also believed the bakery was worth saving as an asset. For a while, I was right. Within 18 months, cash flow improved. The second location stopped bleeding. Catering grew. Dad rebuilt reserves. I received quarterly summaries that looked exactly like what I expected from a small regional business recovering from a bad expansion. Uneven at first, then progressively healthier. Nothing about that made me a saint. I did not postpone retirement to save them. I did not sell my house. I did not empty my checking account and eat canned soup for 3 years while Lily bought shoes. I made a calculated investment that gave me ownership in a business I believed could recover. That was important, because one of the easiest ways to misunderstand what happened later is to assume I had spent my life sacrificing for everyone and suddenly snapped at a wedding. That was not me. I had boundaries. I just had one blind spot. I believed that if something was written down clearly enough, everyone understood where the boundary was. Families are very good at proving that assumption wrong. I closed the March PDF and opened the last 4 quarterly summaries Dad had sent me. At the summary level, nothing screamed apartment deposit. There were ordinary categories: payroll, ingredients, occupancy, marketing, maintenance, delivery, professional services, event development. The spending tied to Lily was buried low enough that I would not have seen the pattern unless I had asked for transaction detail. That alone did not prove anyone had hidden anything. Quarterly summaries are summaries. I knew that. I also knew I had not previously asked for the underlying ledger, because I had never had a reason to believe I needed it. Until my wedding cake ended up in a commercial refrigerator across town. Ian came over and looked at the screen. Anything? Nothing conclusive. You say that like you're disappointed. I'm relieved. He gave me a look. I am, I said. I would love for this to be a stupid coding mistake. Do you think it is? I think my mother rerouted our wedding cake and Dad wouldn't answer a basic question about company money. That wasn't what I asked. No. He waited. I don't think it's a coding mistake. He nodded once. Okay. I leaned back in the chair and rubbed my eyes. Then I thought about Lily. That was where my reasoning got less clean. My sister and I had never been enemies. We were 12 years apart, which meant we had spent most of childhood in completely different stages of life. When I was filling out college applications, Lily was learning to read. When I was working my first real job, she was still asking me if she could borrow my nail polish. I did babysit her sometimes. I helped with homework. I drove her to dance lessons when Mom was slammed at the bakery. But I was not her second mother, and I never wanted to be. The part that shaped us more was how differently our parents reacted when one of us struggled. When Lily got a bad grade, Mom wanted to know what the teacher had failed to explain. When I got a bad grade, Mom asked what I was going to do differently next time. When Lily's first serious boyfriend dumped her, Mom rearranged an entire weekend, made soup, took time off from the bakery, and slept on the couch outside Lily's room because she was afraid Lily would spend the night crying alone. When my engagement in my late 20s ended after I discovered my fiancé had been lying to me, Dad drove over with a bottle of wine, stayed for an hour and said, "You'll figure it out. You always do." At the time, I heard that as confidence. For years, I heard almost everything that way. There was a memory from when I was 17 that probably explains why. I had applied for a competitive summer program I was convinced would change my life. I did not get in. I was humiliated in the way only a 17-year-old can be humiliated by a rejection letter. Mom found me sitting on the back steps behind the bakery after closing. She did not tell me it was their fault. She did not call the program. She did not say the judges were idiots. She sat beside me with a tray of cinnamon rolls that had come out too dark to sell and said, "One bad day doesn't get to decide who you are." I remembered that sentence for 22 years. It helped me through breakups, bad bosses, promotions I did not get, and projects that failed despite everything I did right. Mom had taught me resilience. That was real, which was probably why it took me so long to see the other side of it. Once your family decides you are resilient, they start believing resilience is what you require instead of care. I did not understand that yet. Not fully. What I understood that morning was much smaller. I needed to know what Lily knew. I called her. She answered on the 4th ring. "Hey." Her voice sounded cautious. "Are you busy?" "No." "Can we talk?" There was a pause. "About yesterday?" "About the bakery." Another pause. "What about it?" "I saw a payment related to your apartment deposit." Silence. "How?" "That's what I'm asking." "I don't know." "Lily." I don't. You moved last year. Yes. Mom and Dad helped with the deposit. Yes. How much? I don't remember. You don't remember how much money somebody gave you? I think it was 5,000, maybe 6. You think? She exhaled hard. Why are you interrogating me? Because I found part of it in the bakery's books. What do you mean? It was coded as brand support. I don't know what that means. I'm aware. That sounded rude. It wasn't supposed to sound nice. There was a longer silence. Then Lily said, Mom said they were helping me. With personal money? I assumed so. Why? What do you mean why? Why did you assume it was personal money? Because they're my parents. That doesn't answer the question. What answer do you want, Erica? I want to know whether you knew the bakery was paying things for you. No. It came quickly. Too quickly, I thought. And that was where I made my first mistake. Really? Yes, really. The gender reveal too? Mom said the bakery was covering it. You told me that already. Then why are you asking again? Because there's a difference between Mom and Dad giving you something and a company I own part of paying for it. I don't think of the bakery that way. Well, I do. I know, you think of everything that way. What does that mean? It means everything with you is contracts and ownership and who approved what. I laughed once, without humor. That's an interesting complaint from someone whose apartment deposit may have come out of a company account. I didn't know that. Did you ask? She went quiet. I should have stopped there. I should have separated two facts. Lily might not have known. Lily also might not have wanted to know. Those were not the same thing. Instead, I said, You're very good at not asking questions when the answer might make something less convenient. Her voice changed. Wow. Am I wrong? You called me to ask what I knew, and now you've already decided. I asked whether you knew company money was paying for personal things, and I said no. You also accepted thousands of dollars without knowing where it came from. From Mom and Dad. They own 66% of a business. That doesn't mean every dollar in the business is their wallet. I don't know the structure like you do. You work there. I do social media. I don't review financial statements. That's convenient. Stop saying convenient like I designed some conspiracy. I leaned forward. I didn't say conspiracy. You don't have to. I can hear you. No, what you can hear is me asking why there are company expenses tied to your apartment. And I told you I don't know. She sounded angry now. Not slippery. Not panicked. Angry. I heard it and still pushed. What else have Mom and Dad paid for? Why? So I know what to look for. That is unbelievable. No, Lily. Finding your apartment deposit under brand support is unbelievable. Maybe it was related to work. Was your apartment part of a marketing campaign? I don't know. Her voice cracked. That stopped me. For 1 second, I pictured her standing in her kitchen with one hand over her stomach, angry and scared and wondering why her sister had turned into an auditor less than 24 hours after the wedding. Then she said, You always do this. Do what? Talk to me like I'm stupid. I went still. I don't. You do. That's not fair. You think because you know how contracts work and spreadsheets work and business works, everybody who doesn't know those things is irresponsible. That's not what I think. Really? Because you're talking to me like I personally stole money from you. I never said you stole anything. You didn't have to. I closed my eyes. Some of what she was saying was unfair. Some of it was not. That was the irritating thing about family arguments. People can weaponize a truth without making the truth false. I'm asking questions because I found something that shouldn't be there. Then ask Mom. I did. And? She told me to ask Dad. That sounds like Mom. I almost smiled despite myself. Then Lily added, I really didn't know. There was something in the way she said it that made me pause. Not a performance. Not a dramatic plea. Just tired. I need to go, she said. I'm nauseous and I don't want to fight with you. Okay. And for what it's worth, I thought you agreed to the reveal. I know. I wouldn't have done it if I knew you hadn't. I wanted to believe that. At the time, I almost did. Okay, I said again. She hung up. I sat staring at the phone. Ian came out of the bathroom carrying a toiletry bag. How bad? I may have accused my pregnant sister of participating in a financial conspiracy before breakfast. He put the bag down. Did she participate? I don't know. Then that sentence probably answered your question. I looked at him. You think I was unfair. I think you asked her what she knew, and then argued with the answer because it didn't fit what you already suspected. That sounds like unfair. It sounds like you. I leaned back. Thank you. You married me for this. I married you despite this. He sat across from me. Can I ask something? You're going to anyway. Is it possible she really didn't know? Yes. Is it possible she likes getting things enough that she avoids asking where they come from? Yes. Those can both be true. I hated that he was right because I had been treating them like competing explanations. If Lily had known the bakery was paying personal expenses, that was one kind of problem. If she had not known because she simply accepted whatever Mom and Dad offered without asking, that was another. I had no evidence yet for the first. I had plenty of irritation about the second. Those were not interchangeable. I picked up my phone and sent Lily a short message. I was too aggressive. I still need answers, but I should not have told you what you knew before I had proof. I'm sorry for that. She did not respond. I did not expect her to. That afternoon, Ian and I left for our honeymoon. I made one rule for myself before boarding the plane. No calls to my parents. No spreadsheet at dinner. No turning the trip into an investigation. I lasted almost 3 days. In my defense, I did not break the rule because I was obsessively checking the bakery from a beach chair. I broke it because Dad sent the quarterly report. The timing was normal. End of March. Nothing suspicious about that. I opened it once we were back in the room. At the high level, the bakery still looked functional. Revenue was slightly ahead of the previous year. Payroll had risen, but not alarmingly. Food costs were up. Catering was strong. Marketing had increased. That word caught my eye now. Marketing. Before the wedding, I would have glanced at the percentage and moved on. It was not wildly outside what we owned. It a growing retail and catering business might spend. Now I clicked deeper. I did not have full transaction access in the summary itself, but the March detail Dad had already sent made me realize how many very different expenses could live inside the same broad heading. I emailed the outside accounting firm. The message was simple. As a member, I'm conducting a review of related party and marketing expenditures. Please provide transaction-level detail for the last 12 months, including supporting documentation where available, and let me know what additional records are maintained outside the quarterly management package. I copied Dad. I did not copy Mom. 30 minutes later, Dad replied, "Is this really necessary while you're away?" I answered, "Yes." That was all. The accounting firm replied the following morning. The person who handled our account was named Melissa Ortiz. She had worked with the bakery for years, mostly bookkeeping support, monthly closes, payroll coordination, management summaries, and tax preparation support. She was not an auditor. She was not responsible for deciding whether my parents' explanations were morally acceptable. If management coded an expense as brand development and gave her documentation that matched the coding, her job was to record it unless something obviously required correction. Her email was professional. Of course, we can provide the detailed ledger and supporting schedules. Do you also want the current expansion project folder included, or should we limit this request to historical transactions? I stared at that sentence. I read it again. Ian was sitting on the balcony with coffee. He looked inside when he heard the chair scrape against the floor. What happened? I turned the laptop around. He came in and read the email. What expansion project? I don't know. You've never heard of it? No. You own a third of the company, 34%. He gave me a look. This feels like the wrong time to correct the percentage. It matters. Of course it does. I took the laptop back and typed. Please include the expansion folder. Melissa replied less than 10 minutes later. Certainly. I'll upload everything to the secure portal. There was no alarm in her tone, no suggestion she thought she had revealed a secret, which told me something important. Whatever this was, at least one outside professional believed I already knew about it. The portal notification came that evening. I waited until Ian was showering before opening it, which was hypocritical considering the rule I had made for myself. But by then, pretending I was not going to look would have been more distracting than looking. There were multiple folders: historical transactions, related party support, marketing, lender correspondence, and one folder at the bottom: expansion project. I clicked it. Inside were budgets, preliminary site notes, a draft compensation model, and a presentation deck. At the top of every document was the same name I had first seen beneath my sister's gender reveal expense: Caldwell Beginnings. Until that moment, I had thought the strange project code might be an accounting label somebody created for a handful of maternity-related promotions. It wasn't. It had a budget. It had a lender folder. And it had a business plan. I opened the first document in the Caldwell Beginnings folder, expecting a rough concept note. What I found was a 38-page business plan. The title page showed a soft watercolor logo in pale green and cream, with the words Caldwell Beginnings beneath a line drawing of a cake stand surrounded by tiny stars. Under that was a tagline I had never seen before: From first announcements to first birthdays. The next page described a proposed third Caldwell concept built around baby showers, gender reveals, children's birthdays, baptism and christening receptions, new parent brunches, and small family celebrations. It wasn't simply another bakery location. The plan combined a cafe, event room, custom dessert counter, gift partnerships, and what it called milestone-driven social content. Whoever had written the deck had put real work into it. There were demographic estimates for young families around Columbus, preliminary pricing, event packages, projected catering revenue, and a section on community-facing brand leadership. That last section had Lily's photograph on it. I stared at the screen. The picture had been taken at Caldwell Bakehouse months earlier. Lily was standing behind the counter in a green apron, smiling at something outside the frame. Beneath the image were the words, Proposed Creative Director and Brand Lead, Lily Caldwell. I scrolled. Her name appeared again in the staffing plan, again in the launch calendar, again in the compensation assumptions. By the time I reached the end of the document, I no longer had to guess what Caldwell Beginnings was supposed to become. It was Lily's division. Not literally hers. She did not own it. She had never invested in the company. But the entire concept was being built around her as the face of it. I sat there with the laptop open, while the sound of the shower ran behind the hotel bathroom door, and tried to separate what offended me personally from what concerned me as an owner. That distinction mattered. My parents were allowed to have ideas without asking me. They were allowed to think Lily was talented. They were allowed to imagine future projects. If Dad had shown me a one-page proposal saying they wanted to explore a family event concept and believed Lily could lead the social side, I might have had questions, but I would not have called it a betrayal. This was not a one-page proposal. There was a budget. There were preliminary site notes. There was compensation. There was lender correspondence. There were photographs. And there was a project code that had already been used to classify expenses from my wedding. I opened the presentation deck next. The first few slides were exactly what I expected: market trends, customer profiles, pictures of decorated cakes, children's tables, balloon arches, and styled dessert displays pulled from stock libraries. Then I reached a slide titled Early Brand Validation. There was my reception. Not a professional photo, a phone photo. The image had been taken from the side of the ballroom, while Lily stood beside the pink-filled gender reveal cake. I could see my floral arrangements behind her. Part of our sweetheart table was visible at the edge. My wedding colors, my rented linens, my centerpieces, my guests blurred into the background. Another slide showed Lily holding one hand over her mouth after seeing the pink filling. Another showed Mom beside her with the microphone. I recognized the angle immediately. Mom had taken at least one of them. The others looked like phone shots from someone standing near the catering entrance. There was a caption beneath the images. Pilot Family Milestone Activation demonstrated strong emotional engagement and visual compatibility with proposed Caldwell Beginnings positioning. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because if I had not laughed, I probably would have thrown the laptop. Ian came out of the bathroom wearing a hotel robe and rubbing a towel over his hair. What? I turned the screen toward him. He walked over. His expression changed as he read. That's our wedding. Yes. They put our wedding in a business presentation. Yes. After you specifically told the photographer not to let them use it. These aren't from our photographer. Ian leaned closer. He pointed at one image. Your mom took that. I think so. And this? Could be Lily. Could be someone from the bakery. He sat beside me. I scrolled back to the title slide. Caldwell Beginnings, he read. That's the same thing you saw in the ledger. Yes. So the cake wasn't just a gender reveal. That's what I'm trying to figure out. He looked at me. You know what it looks like. I do. You don't have to say it yet. I know. That was the rule I was forcing myself to follow. Evidence first. Interpretation second. I had already made one mistake with Lily by deciding what she knew before I had proof. I was not going to make the same mistake here. I opened the compensation model. That helped. Lily's proposed base salary was $92,000. I actually checked the number twice because I thought I had misread it. $92,000. There was also a target bonus of up to 15% based on revenue and event booking milestones, plus a travel and promotional allowance. Lily's current role at the bakery was nowhere near that level. She handled social media, assisted with community events, coordinated some local partnerships, and occasionally worked the front of house when one of the locations was short-staffed. She was not useless. I want to be fair about that. Lily understood Instagram better than either of my parents. She had helped improve the bakery's online presence. She could take an ordinary tray of cookies and photograph it in a way that made people want to order 20. But $92,000 was not a sentimental raise. It was a management package. And under our operating agreement, a related party compensation arrangement at that level required more than my parents' combined 66%. I opened the agreement from my own records and checked the threshold even though I already knew it. 75% approval for material-related party compensation over $75,000 annually. Mom and Dad could not approve Lily's package without me. They also could not approve a new location or new debt above $250,000 without me. I went back to the expansion folder. There was no vote, no signed member consent, no email asking for approval. What there was, instead, was a financing folder. I stared at it for several seconds before opening it. Ian had gone back to packing. He knew better than to interrupt me when I was reading documents that had changed the temperature of the room. The preliminary lender materials were addressed to Dad. Caldwell Bakehouse was exploring a new credit facility of approximately $450,000 to support Caldwell Beginnings. I kept reading. The project budget was larger than that. Approximately $640,000 all in, according to one version of the model. Some of the remaining amount would come from existing cash, some from a landlord improvement allowance if the lease terms were finalized, and some from owner-supported liquidity. I clicked through the lender assumptions. There were 3 names listed under proposed guarantors: Douglas Caldwell, Janet Caldwell, Erica Caldwell. I stopped moving. The strange thing was that I was not angry about my name being there. Not immediately. There was no forged signature, no fabricated authorization. Banks discuss proposed guarantors before paperwork is signed all the time. My name appearing in an internal financing assumption was not itself misconduct. What mattered was that my parents had been building an entire capital plan around the idea that I would eventually say yes. I had never been asked. I checked the date. The lender correspondence began 3 weeks before the wedding. I looked at the presentation deck again, then at the gender reveal line item, then at Lily's compensation model. 3 weeks before my mother stood in the middle of my reception and told a ballroom full of people that the evening was suddenly about both her daughters. My parents were already talking to a lender about a $640,000 expansion built around one of those daughters and partially dependent on the other daughter's guarantee. Ian zipped a suitcase closed. You're doing the face. What face? The one where you stop blinking. I blink. Not when you're angry at a document. I push the laptop away. Do you know what I hate most? That they didn't tell you? No. That they used the wedding? No. He waited. I hate that some of this might actually be a decent idea. He looked surprised. I turned the screen back toward us. The market case isn't ridiculous. Family events are already part of the bakery's business. A smaller event-focused concept might work. The pricing assumptions are aggressive, but not insane. The location they're looking at makes sense. And Lily? That's different. Why? Because an idea being viable doesn't make the way you build it acceptable. He nodded. That was exactly the problem. If the business plan had been obviously stupid, I could have dismissed it. Instead, the deeper I looked, the more I saw a plan that might have been worth discussing if my parents had actually discussed it with me. They hadn't. They had started spending. They had started pitching. They had started negotiating. And somewhere along the way, they had treated my future consent as a line item. I closed the laptop. Ian looked relieved. You done? For tonight. Are you sure? No. That's honest. I stood and walked to the balcony doors. Our honeymoon was supposed to be short and quiet. We had deliberately chosen something uncomplicated instead of traveling internationally right after the wedding. A few days away, good food, no schedules, then home. I had promised myself I would not spend it auditing my parents. I was failing. Not completely. I still went to dinner with Ian that night. I left my phone in my purse. We talked about the wedding before the cake arrived. We laughed about his uncle trying to dance during cocktail hour. We argued over whether my cousin had intentionally stolen 3 macarons in a napkin. We talked about where we wanted to travel the following year. For 2 hours, I remembered that I had gotten married. That mattered. I did not want my parents' behavior to become the central memory of my wedding or my honeymoon. But the next morning, I sent Dad an email. I kept it short. I've reviewed the Caldwell Beginnings folder. We need to discuss the project, Lily's proposed compensation, the spending already coded to it, and the financing assumptions. Ian and I will be back this week. Do not enter into any new commitments related to the expansion before we talk. Dad replied in less than 15 minutes. Nothing has been finalized. Enjoy your honeymoon. I read the sentence and felt my jaw tighten. Nothing has been finalized. That was technically true. It also avoided every question. I answered. Then there should be no problem waiting. He did not respond. We returned to Columbus 2 days later. I went back to work the next morning. That may sound strange, but I needed normal. My office had emails, deadlines, people asking me why a vendor's implementation schedule had slipped, and a conference call about staffing that had nothing to do with my mother or wedding cakes. By lunchtime, I had almost convinced myself I could leave the bakery issue until the weekend. Then Mom called. I let it ring once before answering. Hi, you emailed your father. Yes. He says you're upset about Caldwell Beginnings. I have questions. It's a business idea. Then why didn't I know about it? You don't know every idea we have? I know about ideas once they have $640,000 budgets. She went quiet. That told me Dad had not told her exactly what I had seen. Where did you get that number? From the project folder. Why are you going through project folders? I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. When I put it back, I said, because I own 34% of the company. There it is again. What? 34%. That number bothers you? Sometimes I think you care more about percentages than people. And sometimes I think you only dislike percentages when they limit what you can decide. Silence. I knew I had hit something. Mom lowered her voice. Lily has worked for that bakery too. I never said she hasn't. She's good with customers. She built our online following. Younger mothers like her. She understands that market in a way you don't. Probably. My answer clearly surprised her. I'm not arguing Lily has nothing to contribute, I said. I'm asking why there is a $92,000 related party compensation package in a project I was never asked to approve. She deserves to be paid. Then approve a market salary through the process we agreed to. It is a market salary. Maybe. That isn't the only issue. You always find another issue. The package crosses the approval threshold. Mom made an impatient sound. Your father said you were going to turn this into a legal exercise. Governance isn't a legal exercise. It's how 3 owners avoid pretending one another don't exist. This is our company. There it was. I did not answer for a second. Then I said, "Say that again." "You know what I mean." "No, I want to make sure I do." "I mean your father and I built Caldwell Bakehouse." "Yes, we spent decades on it." "Yes, we gave you and Lily everything we could because of it." "Yes, and now, every time we want to make a decision, you act like we need permission from our child." "You don't need permission from your child. You need approval from another member of the LLC when the agreement says you do." She exhaled sharply. "You hear yourself?" "Very clearly. Lily does not have your life." That shift was so fast, I almost admired it. We had gone from ownership to Lily in one sentence. What does my life have to do with the operating agreement? She doesn't have a six-figure corporate career. She doesn't have investments. She doesn't have your house. She doesn't have a husband who can take her away whenever things get uncomfortable. Ian did not take me anywhere. We went on our honeymoon. You know what I mean. No, Mom, I know what you want me to mean. She needs something that's hers. Then help her build something that is actually hers. That is what we are doing. With company money. It is a company project. Then company owners get a say. Mom went quiet again. When she spoke, her voice was colder. You are making this harder than it has to be. I looked through the glass wall of my office at two coworkers walking past. No. I'm asking the questions you were hoping to avoid. I have to go. Before you do, answer one thing. What? Was my wedding part of the Caldwell Beginnings launch plan? That's ridiculous. The pitch deck uses the gender reveal. Those are pictures. The gender reveal was coded as a promotional event. We needed somewhere to categorize it. You needed a project code for a family gift? Mom did not answer. I felt something settle inside me. Not certainty, but direction. I'll talk to Dad, I said. Please do. She hung up. Dad agreed to meet 2 evenings later at the original Caldwell location after closing. Mom came too. I had expected that. Ian offered to come. I told him no, not because I was trying to protect my parents. Because this was a member discussion before it was a family confrontation, I wanted to know whether they could answer business questions without turning them into accusations about sisterhood. The answer was no. Dad spread several printed pages across the small conference table behind the production office. We were going to bring this to you, he began. When? Once we had something concrete. You have a $640,000 budget. It's a model. You have a compensation package. A draft. You have site notes. Preliminary. You have lender correspondence. Exploratory. You have $15,000 identified for option and preparation costs. Dad's mouth tightened. Mom folded her arms. See, this is exactly why we didn't tell you early. Every rough number becomes a prosecution. I turned to her. I am not prosecuting you. I am asking why you're calling a project preliminary after spending company money against its project code. Dad jumped in. The spending so far is minor. That isn't the point. Then what is the point? The point is that Caldwell Beginnings has already been treated as real when it was useful to spend money, but suddenly becomes imaginary when I ask why I wasn't told. Dad leaned back. That one landed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. All right, he said. We should have discussed the concept with you earlier. Mom looked at him. Douglas. No, she's right about that. It was not an apology. Exactly. But it was the first direct acknowledgement I had gotten. I nodded. Thank you. Dad put his glasses back on. We were trying to see whether it was feasible before dragging everybody through a long discussion. Everybody? You. I almost smiled. At least that's honest. Mom did not appreciate the comment. Dad continued. The current locations are stable. Catering is performing. The market for family events is good. The site we're looking at has better parking than either of our current stores. And the landlord is willing to discuss improvements. We thought if the numbers worked, we could bring you a complete proposal instead of half an idea. That still doesn't explain Lily's package. Mom answered. She's central to the concept. Why? She knows the customer. That can justify a role. It doesn't justify bypassing approval. We weren't bypassing anything. You already put her compensation into the financing model. It had to have staffing assumptions. Then use a placeholder. Mom stared at me. You really can't stand the idea of her having this, can you? There it was. I sat back. I have spent the last 20 minutes talking about approval thresholds, project spending, and financing. You heard jealousy. I heard my older daughter picking apart every reason her sister might finally have a future in this company. A future in the company is not the same as being handed a $92,000 title before the project is approved. She earned more responsibility. Then show me the role description, the performance expectations, and why that compensation is market. You make everything sound so cold. No, I make it specific. Dad lifted a hand. Enough. We both stopped. He looked at me. Would you consider the role if the package were supported by market data? Yes. Mom blinked. Dad did too. I continued. I would consider the whole project if the economics work, if related party issues are disclosed, and if we follow the agreement. Mom shook her head. You expect me to believe that? That is your problem. What does that mean? It means you keep arguing with what you think I feel instead of what I am actually saying. Dad glanced down at the papers. I let the room stay quiet. Then I asked the question that mattered most. How far are you with the bank? Dad's attention sharpened. We've had preliminary conversations. About $450,000? Yes. New facility? Yes. Secured how? Business assets, standard covenants, personal guarantees. Whose? He hesitated. That was enough. But I made him say it. Whose guarantees? Mine, your mother's. And? He looked at me. And yours. Mom immediately added. Nothing has been signed. I know. You're acting like we forged your name. I have never said that. Then why are you looking at us like that? Because you built a financing plan around me before asking me whether I was willing to participate. Dad leaned forward. The lender wants guarantees from the material owners. That's normal. I know. You have the strongest personal financial profile of the three of us. I know. So you knew this would probably come up. No. I knew a bank might ask. That is different from you assuming my answer. Dad looked frustrated. It's a guarantee, Erica. We're not asking you to write a $450,000 check. I stared at him. You know better than to say that to me. He did. A personal guarantee was not a ceremonial signature. It meant if the company defaulted under the wrong circumstances, the lender could pursue guarantors according to the documents. Maybe the business succeeded and nobody ever cared about the guarantee. Maybe it failed and the guarantee mattered a great deal. The entire point was that it placed personal risk behind company debt. Dad knew that. I knew that. Which was why calling it routine irritated me more than almost anything else he had said. How much existing debt does the bakery have right now? I asked. About $180. And you want to add another $450. For an expansion with projected revenue. Projected. Yes, projected. That's how expansion works. And you expect the company to contribute existing cash, too. A portion. How much? Depends on landlord terms. Current unrestricted cash? Dad looked away. I noticed. That question would matter later. For now, I stayed with the guarantee. When were you going to ask me? We were planning to sit down after you got back. I'm back. We're sitting down. No. You're explaining why my name is already in the assumptions. It is an assumption, not a commitment. Exactly. Dad frowned. I leaned forward. You assume the answer before you ask the question. Mom said, because we know you. I turned toward her. That may be the problem. She looked offended. Dad gathered some of the papers together. Can we please stop making this personal? I almost laughed. You built a business plan around my sister, used her gender reveal at my wedding as promotional material, and included me as a guarantor. Which part would you like me to treat as impersonal? Mom pushed back from the table. That gender reveal was not a marketing campaign. Then why was it coded as one? Because the bakery made the cake. That doesn't answer the question. It was convenient accounting. Then we should be able to correct it. We can. Good. Mom narrowed her eyes. You really are going to go through every receipt, aren't you? I had not decided that yet. Her question made me decide. If that's what it takes. You don't trust us. I thought about the wedding cake sitting untouched in a walk-in refrigerator. I thought about Dad telling me the bakery covered the reveal. I thought about a project folder no one had intended to show me until it was convenient. I trust documents more than reassurance right now. Mom stood. This is unbelievable. Dad stayed seated. He looked tired. Erica, what do you want? For tonight? Yes. I want no new commitments on Caldwell Beginnings until I've reviewed the project and the related spending. We can pause major commitments. Not major, new. Dad looked at me. That could cost us the site. Then you should have gotten approvals before creating a deadline. Mom shook her head. There's no point talking to you when you're like this. She left the room. Dad watched the door close behind her. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he said, She thinks you hate the idea because it's Lily. She thinks that because it's easier than admitting she did this backward. Dad didn't answer. I gathered my notes. As I stood, he said, The lender conversation isn't final. I know. They just want all three of us if we move forward. I know. We were going to ask you after the honeymoon. I looked at him. Why after? He seemed surprised by the question. Because you were getting married. You were discussing the loan before the wedding. We weren't going to bother you with it. But you were comfortable using the wedding for the project. His expression tightened. That's not how I would describe it. How would you describe it? He did not answer. I waited. Eventually he said, Erica, this is a normal expansion conversation. Don't turn it into something bigger. I looked down at the financing summary still sitting on the table. $450,000 in new debt. $640,000 project. A proposed $92,000 salary for my sister. My personal guarantee listed as an assumption. A third location that required approval my parents did not have. None of that was routine. And for the first time since my mother took the microphone at my wedding, I stopped wondering whether I was overreacting. I was starting to wonder how much they had already committed, because they believed I would eventually do what they needed me to do. The next morning, Dad called before I left for work. I was in the kitchen pouring coffee when my phone lit up with his name. Ian was sitting at the island reading something on his tablet. He looked up when I answered, but he didn't stop me. Morning, I said. Dad skipped the greeting. We need to meet again. I assumed we would. Today. What changed? The bank wants updated numbers by Friday. I set the coffee pot down. That sounds like your deadline. It affects all of us. Not unless I agree to make it affect me. There was a pause. Dad lowered his voice. Erica, I'm asking you to approach this like an owner, not like an angry daughter. I leaned against the counter. I have been approaching it like an owner. That is why you're uncomfortable. Ian looked over the top of his tablet. Dad exhaled. I'll send you the lender materials. All of them? Yes. Good. And I'd like to talk before you start making assumptions. I'm not the one who put my name into a financing model before asking me. That is not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. He went quiet again. Then he said, 6 o'clock, original location. I'll be there. When the call ended, Ian put his tablet down. You're smiling. I'm not smiling. You are a little. I'm getting documents. That explains it. I took my coffee and sat across from him. There's something else. What? I think Dad is more nervous about the bank than he's saying. What makes you think that? He called me before 7 in the morning to tell me to stop making assumptions. That does sound like a man with nothing to hide. I gave him a look. Ian raised both hands. Sorry. I'll return to being supportive and emotionally neutral. You've never been emotionally neutral in your life. True. I glanced at the time. I need to go. He nodded. Then, before I stood, he said, You know you don't have to decide anything tonight. I know. Actually, no? I hesitated. Yes. He watched me for another second. That hesitation was not encouraging. I laughed despite myself. At work, I forced myself to stay inside the boundaries of my actual job until lunch. I had 3 meetings, a vendor escalation, and a staffing review that required enough attention to prevent me from checking my personal email every 5 minutes. Just after noon, Dad's lender packet arrived. I downloaded it but did not open it immediately. That was progress. I ate lunch first. Then I closed my office door. The lender materials were exactly what I expected in some ways, and more concerning in others. The proposed $450,000 facility was structured as a combination of term financing and working capital support for the Caldwell Beginnings expansion. The bank had underwritten it based on business performance, collateral, and personal guarantees from the material owners. Dad and Mom were listed. So was I. Again, there was no forged authorization, no signature, no misrepresentation that I had already agreed. But my financial profile was clearly part of the lender's comfort. That mattered. The bakery's existing debt was about $180,000. The proposed expansion would push total debt materially higher, while adding a third concept that had no operating history. The projections showed healthy revenue after ramp-up, but they also assumed the new location reached meaningful event booking volume within its first year. Possible. Not guaranteed. I kept reading. There was a site option deadline. There were preliminary design costs. There was a $15,000 option and preparation amount at risk if the project did not move forward. That number did not scare me. What scared me was the psychology behind it. $15,000 was enough for someone to say, "We've already spent this much, so we can't stop now." It was not enough to threaten the survival of a business doing more than $2.5 million in annual revenue. That distinction was important. I pulled up the operating agreement again and reviewed the protected decision section. New debt over $250,000 required at least 75% member approval. A new location required the same. Material capital commitments above $150,000 required the same. Lily's proposed compensation package crossed the related party threshold too. None of that meant I controlled the company. It meant my parents could run ordinary operations, but they could not build this expansion without me. He sat back. For the first time, I understood the actual leverage. Not emotional leverage, not wedding leverage, governance leverage. And that meant I needed to be very careful about how I used it. At 6, Dad was waiting in the conference room when I arrived. Mom was not there. That surprised me. Dad noticed. She's staying home. Her choice? She didn't think this conversation would be productive. That may be the first thing we've agreed on this week. He gave me a tired look. Can we not start like that? I sat down. Fine. There were 2 folders on the table and a legal pad in front of Dad. He looked older than he had at the wedding. Not dramatically. Just more tired around the eyes. For 1 second, I felt guilty. Then I reminded myself that fatigue was not evidence of innocence. Dad slid 1 folder toward me. "You have the lender packet." "I do. This is the updated cash forecast." I opened it. "Walk me through it." He did. That was the part of him I understood best. When Dad talked numbers, he became calmer. He showed me current revenue, seasonality, payroll, supplier obligations, existing debt service, and what he expected the next 2 quarters to look like. Wedding and graduation season would help. Catering deposits were healthy. Both retail locations were stable. The business was not collapsing. That was important. Then he showed me the expansion scenario. If Caldwell Beginnings moved forward, cash would get tight during build-out and the first months of operation. The new facility was designed to bridge that period. I tapped the page. "What happens if we don't expand?" Dad frowned. "The business continues." "Any layoffs?" "Not because of that." "Payroll risk?" "Not from canceling the project." "Debt covenant problem?" "No." "Vendor problem?" "No." "So the urgent issue is the expansion?" "Yes." "Not the bakery." He looked at me. "The expansion is part of the bakery." "That's not what I asked." He leaned back. "No, the current operation is stable." I nodded. That answer changed more than he realized. For days, the conversation had been wrapped in the language of protecting the family business. But if I refused to guarantee the new loan, I would not be destroying Caldwell Bakehouse. I would be stopping a new project. Those were different acts. Dad watched me. "I can see what you're doing." "What am I doing?" "Building a case that you can say no without feeling responsible." "I don't need a case for that." "Yes, you do." I looked at him. He continued. "You've always needed to know you're being reasonable." There was enough truth in that to irritate me. "That's not a flaw." "I didn't say it was. You implied it." Dad rubbed his forehead. "I'm trying to get you to understand that there are consequences either way." "I do understand. If we walk away from the site, we lose the option money." "I know. We lose design costs. I know. We may not get another location like it. I know. The bank may be less enthusiastic the next time. I know. Then why do you keep talking like saying no is costless? I never said it was costless. He stopped. I leaned forward. I said the cost is different from what you and Mom keep implying. What do you mean? You keep talking as though if I don't sign, 30 employees lose their jobs and the bakery folds. I never said that. You've come close. Dad looked away. I opened the cash forecast again. Your own numbers say the base business survives. So let's stop using the bakery as shorthand for the expansion. His jaw tightened. You know how difficult it is to grow a family business. Yes. You know timing matters. Yes. Then you know this isn't just about Lily. I never said it was. He gave me a skeptical look. I tapped the compensation page. This part is about Lily. She has a role. A proposed role. Fine. Proposed. At $92,000 plus bonus. Market. Supported. Then show me the market support. Dad pushed another page toward me. He had actually done it. There were salary ranges for creative leads and brand managers at regional hospitality and food businesses. The range was broad, but $92,000 was not absurd. I read the page carefully. Then I said, okay. Dad blinked. Okay? The salary isn't automatically unreasonable. He stared at me. You sound surprised. I'm surprised. You're surprised. Your mother thinks you're going to reject anything connected to Lily. Mom has decided what I think before I say it. Desaihu. She thinks you resent how much help Lily gets. I do resent some of it. There it was. I said it plainly. Dad went still. That doesn't mean every idea involving Lily is wrong. He studied me. What do you resent? I almost told him it didn't matter. Then I changed my mind. You want the short version? Yes. I resent that when Lily needs something, the family conversation becomes about what everyone can do for her. When I need something, the conversation becomes about what I can handle myself. That's not fair. Of course you think that. We've helped you. Yes. We paid for college. You helped with part of college. We supported you. I didn't say you abandoned me. Then what are you saying? I'm saying you've always treated my competence as evidence that I require less. Dad's expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. I knew he understood the sentence. He looked down at his legal pad. Lily has had a harder time. With what? Career, stability, relationships. And she needs more support. I sat back. There it was again. Need. The word my family used as though it came with ownership rights. I don't object to you helping her with your money. It is our money. Is it? Dad looked up. You know what I mean. No, that's exactly what I'm trying to determine. He was quiet. I reached into my bag and took out a printout of the March transaction detail. I found the apartment deposit. His mouth tightened. I know. Was that company money? Yes. Was it classified properly? He hesitated. That depends. On what? Lily was doing more content work at the time. We discussed having her closer to the original location. Did her lease require her to move for the company? No. Was the apartment a company apartment? No. Was there a written relocation agreement? No. So why was the deposit coded as brand support? Dad rubbed his jaw. Your mother thought it was defensible. That wasn't my question. It was coded badly. Badly or intentionally? That is a loaded question. It's an important one. He looked irritated now. Erica, there are hundreds of transactions every month. I'm not asking about hundreds. No. You're picking individual things out of 3 years of operations and acting like each one proves some grand scheme. I've only seen a handful. Exactly. Then, give me the rest. He stopped. I watched his face. That was the moment I knew. Not that there was fraud. Not that there was some enormous theft. But that the apartment deposit was not the only thing. How much is there? I asked. Dad looked at me. I don't know. Roughly. I don't know. How much company money has gone toward Lily's personal expenses? I said I don't know. You run the finances. I don't approve every receipt. Did you know some were happening? He looked toward the door. That hurt more than if he had simply said yes. Dad. He rubbed both hands over his face. Your mother handles a lot of the community and marketing side. That wasn't what I asked. I knew there were things. What things? Meals. Photography. Some furniture. Travel here and there. Car? He paused. I had guessed. Dad. There was some support. Apartment? Yes. Medical? Some maternity-related costs may have gone through promotional or benefits categories. I stared at him. How much did you know? Not every item. That's not what I asked. He leaned back sharply. I knew enough to know your mother was helping Lily. There it was. I felt something go cold in my chest. Not because I had believed Dad was perfect, because I had believed he was the break. Mom made emotional decisions. Dad made spreadsheets. That was the arrangement I thought existed. If Mom decided something because Lily needed it, I believed Dad was the one who would ask where the money came from and whether it belonged there. Apparently, sometimes he had asked, and then let it happen anyway. You knew enough, I said. He looked down. You didn't know every receipt, but you knew enough. I knew the company could absorb some of it. That is not the same as it being appropriate. I didn't say it was ideal. Did you tell me? No. Why? He looked at me now. Because I knew how you would react. I actually laughed. It came out sharper than I intended. That's becoming a family motto. Don't. No, really. Mom moved my wedding cake because if she asked, I would say no. You didn't tell me about Lily's expenses because you knew I would object. You built an expansion before asking me because you thought I'd make it difficult. At some point, do you notice the pattern? Dad's face hardened. We were trying to keep the business moving. By avoiding the owner whose approval you needed, by avoiding turning every small decision into a family fight. Apartment deposits are not routine business decisions. Fine. Personal furniture is not routine. I said fine. Then stop acting like my reaction is the problem. He stood and walked to the small window overlooking the production floor. The bakery was closed to customers, but 2 employees were still in the back preparing dough for the morning. Dad watched them for a moment. Then he said, Do you know what happens when cash gets tight? Yes. Do you know what happens when revenue misses? Yes. Do you know what happens when you have 30 people expecting paychecks and the ovens don't care that wholesale flour went up again? Yes. Then you know sometimes you make imperfect decisions because keeping the business alive matters more than making every line pretty. I looked at him. That argument would work better if we were talking about emergency repairs. He turned. What's that supposed to mean? You're using operational hardship to justify spending money on Lily. I'm telling you why I thought we could fix it later. That sentence landed. I stayed very still. Fix what later? Dad closed his eyes. He knew. I waited. Eventually, he said, The classifications, the reimbursements, whatever needed to be adjusted. You thought the expansion would create enough cash to clean it up. He did not answer. Dad. Yes. There it was. Not a confession to stealing. Something more ordinary. And in some ways more infuriating. He had looked at questionable spending and convinced himself future growth would make the present problem disappear. If Caldwell Beginnings succeeded, there would be more revenue, more profit, more room to repay or reclassify things. Maybe no one would feel the loss. That was how he had made it acceptable to himself. You know future revenue doesn't create retroactive consent, I said. Dad looked exhausted. I know how that sounds. Do you? Yes. Because it sounds like you thought if the business made enough money later, it wouldn't matter how you used it now. That is not what I said. It's what you described. He sat back down. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Dad said, I'm not proud of all of it. That was the closest thing to an apology I had heard from him. I wanted it to matter more than it did. Instead, I asked, How much unrestricted cash do we have? He looked up. Right now? Yes. Just under 100,000. I stared at him. The quarterly management commentary had made me think reserves were healthier than that. Exact number? 96 last close. It moves daily. 96,000? Yes. For 2 locations, catering, payroll, existing debt, and seasonal working capital. Yes. And you want the business to contribute cash toward a $640,000 expansion. With financing, that is still thin. It is manageable. With a new facility. Yes. With my guarantee. With all 3 guarantees. I looked down at the forecast. The story was becoming clearer. The bakery was not insolvent. It was not even necessarily unhealthy. But liquidity was tighter than the tone of the summaries had made me believe, while personal and related party spending had been eating into the same pool my parents said they needed to preserve. I thought about the times Dad had recommended leaving more earnings in the business instead of pushing distributions. I had agreed. Not because they guilted me. Because the numbers they presented made retained liquidity sound prudent. I had believed I was making an informed owner decision. Now, I was not sure how informed it had been. Send me the last 36 months of transaction detail, I said. Dad frowned. That is thousands of lines. I know. What exactly are you looking for? Related party transactions, Lily, related support. Anything coded to brand development, promotional events, travel, client entertainment, relocation, or employee support. You're going to review all that yourself? No. That got his attention. I'm hiring an independent CPA. Dad's face changed immediately. Erika, this is bigger than me reading PDFs at night. That makes it sound like you think there's fraud. I think I don't know enough to use that word. Then why bring in an outsider? Because I don't want to accuse anyone incorrectly. That stopped him. I leaned forward. I already made that mistake with Lily. I'm not doing it again. I want someone independent to tell me what's legitimate business spending, what's related party spending that should have been disclosed or classified differently, and what's clearly personal. Dad was silent. That protects you too, I said. He almost smiled. You really believe that? Yes. He studied me for a long moment. You sound exactly like you did 4 years ago. When? When you made us sign the operating agreement. You mean when I invested $180,000? He looked away. Your mother hated that agreement. I know. She thought you were treating us like strangers. I was treating us like business partners. That was the problem. I stared at him. He seemed to realize how that sounded. No, he said quickly. I mean for her. I know what you meant. I packed my papers. Dad said. What are you going to tell the bank? Nothing. I'm not their borrower. They may ask whether you're willing to guarantee. If they ask me directly, I'll answer. And what's the answer? Not yet. He rubbed his forehead again. Erika, the site option expires. I know. $15,000. I know. You're comfortable losing that? No. Then, but I am more comfortable losing $15,000 than putting my personal assets behind $450,000 before I understand the books. Dad had no answer to that. I stood. One more thing. What? Do not tell Mom I'm doing this because I hate Lily. He gave me a tired look. I can't control what your mother thinks. No, but you can stop feeding it. He did not promise. I left anyway. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for several minutes before starting the engine. I had expected anger. What I felt was disappointment. Mom's behavior hurt me, but it fit a pattern I already understood. She loved through intervention. She saw Lily's needs and rushed to solve them. She saw mine and assumed I could handle them. Dad had been different in my head. Dad was supposed to be the person who understood that numbers did not become ethical just because you could make them balance later. I called Ian. He answered immediately. How bad? Dad knew. There was a pause. How much? Not everything. Enough. What does enough mean? Enough that he knew company money was paying personal things for Lily. He thought they could fix the classifications or reimbursements later if the expansion worked. Ian was quiet. Then he said, I'm sorry. That was all. No speech. No advice. And for some reason, that nearly broke me more than the meeting had. I closed my eyes. I really thought he didn't know. I know. I thought Mom pushed and Dad managed. I know. I feel stupid. You're not stupid. I own 1/3 of the company. You own 1/3 of a company you don't operate. I should have looked. Before your mother rerouted your wedding cake, what reason did you have? I stared through the windshield. That sounds like an excuse. No. It sounds like the difference between hindsight and information. I was quiet. Ian let me be. Then he asked, What are you doing next? Independent review. Good. I'm requesting 3 years. Good. I'm not signing anything. Also good. I haven't said never. You don't have to. I took a breath. I'll be home soon. Drive first, investigate later. I smiled despite myself. Yes, Dad. That was unnecessary. It was accurate. When I got home, there was an email from the accounting firm waiting for me. Melissa Ortiz had responded to my request for transaction-level records. Her note was cautious. She said they could provide the general ledger, receipts available in their system, management coding support, and related schedules for the previous 36 months. She also noted that, while the firm had processed transactions based on management-provided classifications and documentation, several related party items might be material when reviewed together, rather than individually. I read that sentence twice. Might be material when reviewed together. Not fraud, not theft, not misconduct. Just an accountant's careful way of saying that the pattern could look very different once someone stopped treating every line as an isolated expense. At the bottom, she asked whether I wanted the records released directly to my independent CPA once I provided authorization. I replied yes. Then I opened a blank document and wrote 3 headings. Legitimate business expense, related party or gray, clearly personal. For the first time since the wedding, I was not trying to understand what my parents meant. I was going to understand what they had actually done. The independent review took longer than I wanted and less time than my parents probably hoped. The CPA I hired, Rachel Monroe, made one thing clear in our first meeting. She was not there to decide whether my family had behaved badly. She was there to tell me what the records supported. Some expenses would be ordinary business costs. Some might be related party transactions that should have been disclosed or classified differently. Some could turn out to be clearly personal and require accounting or tax corrections. She also warned me not to use words like fraud before we had enough information. I appreciated that. By then, I had already learned how dangerous it was to decide what someone knew before I could prove it. Rachel started with 3 years of general ledger activity, then worked backward from the categories that had caught my attention. Marketing, brand development, travel, employee support, client entertainment, promotional events, and miscellaneous reimbursements. She matched receipts where they existed, requested missing documentation, and asked questions that sounded almost boring until you realized how much they exposed. Who attended this dinner? What was the business purpose of that trip? Why was an apartment deposit coded as brand support? Was this furniture installed in a Caldwell location, used for an event display, or delivered to a private residence? Had a photography package produced company-owned content, or was it a personal session? I stayed out of her way as much as I could. I did not want a report that reflected my anger. I wanted one my parents could not dismiss as my interpretation. The first group of expenses was easier than I expected. Some of the spending involving Lily was legitimate. She had traveled to 2 regional food events on behalf of the bakery. There were meals tied to actual partnership meetings. The company had bought social media equipment she used for Caldwell content. Several photography charges produced images that appeared in real campaigns. A few expenses looked questionable at first, but turned out to have reasonable documentation behind them. Every time Rachel moved something into the legitimate category, I felt relieved. I wanted the total to shrink. I wanted to discover that I had taken a handful of unusual charges and built a pattern that was not really there. The second category was messier. There were expenses that might have had some business purpose but were handled badly. Furniture purchased for Lily's apartment had supposedly doubled as a set for lifestyle content during a promotional period. A portion of a trip had been tied to a vendor event, but Lily saw there were later pregnancy-related photographs that Janet had apparently intended to use for Caldwell Beginnings, even though the project had never been approved. Those were the kinds of transactions Rachel described as needing better documentation, disclosure, reclassification, or treatment as compensation rather than ordinary business expense. Then there was the third category. The apartment deposit was in it. So were personal car-related payments. A few household purchases. Several charges for meals with no documented business purpose. A portion of maternity expenses that had never produced company content and had no approved employee benefit basis. Nothing individually looked like someone had emptied a bank account in the middle of the night. That almost made it worse. These were ordinary amounts. 1,500 here, 3,000 there, 500, 2,400, 800. The kind of spending that could disappear inside a business doing more than $2.5 million in annual revenue if no one stepped back and looked at the pattern. Rachel did exactly that. By the end of the first pass, approximately $176,000 over nearly 3 years fell into transactions that required review, reclassification, or closer documentation. I stared at the number on the summary she shared with me. 176,000. Rachel nodded. That is not the same as saying $176,000 was improper. I know. It includes all 3 categories we discussed. I understand. I'm repeating it because this is where owners sometimes stop hearing nuance. I almost smiled. You've met my family? I've met business owners. She turned the screen toward me and showed me how the total broke down. A meaningful portion had legitimate business support. Another section sat in the gray zone and needed better treatment. The clearly personal group was smaller but still substantial enough that I could not dismiss it as casual help between parents and a daughter. I asked the question I had been avoiding. How much of this affects me? Rachel looked at me carefully. That depends on what you mean. I mean financially. You own 34% of the company, but retained earnings are not a personal checking account with 34% labeled Erica. I would not frame this as someone taking a precise fraction directly from you. I wasn't planning to. Good. I looked at the screen again. What I care about is whether I made decisions based on bad information. That is a different question. Dad repeatedly recommended keeping more cash inside the company instead of increasing distributions. That would be reflected in member decisions and management reports. I agreed because I believed liquidity was tight. Rachel nodded. Then the relevant issue is whether material-related party spending affected the liquidity picture while management was presenting retained cash as necessary for operations. That sentence was clinical. It was also exactly what I needed. I had not been robbed of a neat percentage. I had been asked to behave like a cautious owner while my parents quietly behaved like generous parents using the same pool of money. Rachel clicked into another schedule. That was when I saw the photography charge. $1,800. It was not the largest expense. It was not even close. I recognized the month before I recognized the description. The previous summer. I leaned closer. Can you open the support on that? Rachel did. The invoice was for a lifestyle photography package purchased for Lily. It had been a personal branding shoot, apparently justified afterward as possible Caldwell social content. Rachel had found almost no company use of the images. I barely heard the rest, because I remembered that month. Dad had called me on a Thursday afternoon. I had paid a business consultant directly for a short operations review when the bakery was evaluating delivery scheduling software. The company owed me reimbursement. It was not a huge amount, around $2,000. Dad called and asked whether I minded waiting until the following month. Cash is a little tight right now, he had said. I remembered standing beside the window in my office. I remembered not even hesitating. Don't worry about it, I told him. Keep the cash in the company. At the time, I had been proud of that answer. I had thought it meant I understood ownership. You did not pull money out just because you technically could if the business needed breathing room. I looked at the photography invoice again. The dates were 6 days apart. Dad had asked me to wait on roughly $2,000 because cash was tight. 6 days later, the bakery paid $1,800 for Lily's photography package. Rachel noticed I had stopped taking notes. Erica, I remember this one. She waited. I told her. She did not react dramatically. That was another reason I liked her. She simply said, then preserve both records together. The reimbursement request, Dad's email, the payment date, the photography invoice. I nodded, but inside, something had shifted. The $176,000 was a business problem. The $1,800 was personal. Not because I needed the money. I had not. That was exactly the point. My father knew I could wait. So I did. And the space created by my willingness to wait had been used for Lily. For most of my life, I had thought being the person who could handle more was a strength. Sitting in that conference room, I began to understand how easily a strength becomes a resource other people believe they are entitled to spend. That night, I did not call Dad. I called Lily. She answered quickly this time. Hey, do you have a minute? That depends. I'm not calling to fight. She was quiet. Okay. I looked down at the CPA summary on my desk. I owe you a better apology. For what? For telling you that you knew what was happening before I had evidence. She did not say anything. I still think you should have asked more questions, I continued. But that is not the same as knowing the bakery was paying things for you. I mixed those together. So you believe me? I believe you did not know the full ledger. That sounded very specific. It is specific. She sighed. You really can't just say yes. I'm trying not to say more than I know. That is the most Erica sentence I've ever heard. I almost laughed. Probably. There was a pause. Then Lily said, Mom told me she and Dad were helping me. With everything? I don't know what you found. I'm not asking you to defend individual charges. I want to understand Caldwell beginnings. Her tone changed. What about it? When did you first know they were planning it? A couple months ago. Before the wedding? Yes. That did not surprise me anymore. What did Mom tell you? That they were considering a new concept, more events, baby showers, kids' birthdays, stuff like that. She said I could help build the brand. Did she tell you about the creative director role? Eventually. When? Before the wedding. I closed my eyes. Did you know the salary? Not exactly. Did you know it was going to be a significant promotion? Yes. Did you know they needed my approval? Lily hesitated. I knew they needed you involved. That wasn't what I asked. I don't know the operating agreement like you do. You knew I had to agree to something. Yes. And you never mentioned it. It wasn't my project to announce. Lily. What? You were going to be the creative director. It was still Mom and Dad's plan. No, it was a company plan. She exhaled. I knew this would happen. What would happen? You'd find out they wanted to give me something and immediately turn it into a governance problem. I held the phone tighter. I am not angry because they wanted to give you a job. Then what are you angry about? That they were building the job before asking the person whose approval they needed. You. Yes. You always make it sound like everything comes back to you. That stung. I took a second before answering. This particular issue includes my approval and my potential guarantee. So yes, I'm involved. You make it sound like I was sitting there planning how to use your money. I just apologized for assuming that. Then why are we doing this? Because I want to know what you actually knew. She was quiet again. Finally, she said, I have emails. What emails? Mom sent me stuff about the concept. From her Caldwell account? Yes. Can you forward them? Lily did not answer immediately. Why? Because I want to see what you were told. So you can analyze me? No, so I stopped guessing. That seemed to reach her. I'm serious, Lily. If Mom told you they were paying personally and the records show something else, I want to know that. It matters. She sighed. Fine. A few minutes later, an email landed in my inbox. FWID. Caldwell Beginnings brand role. Planning. I opened it. The chain stretched back several weeks before the wedding. At first, it supported Lily. Janet had written that she and Dad were handling startup support. She told Lily not to worry about the financial side. She referred to several expenses as things we can cover. There was nothing telling Lily that company money was paying her apartment deposit or personal costs. I felt a strange mix of relief and frustration. I had been wrong about that part. Then I kept reading. The conversation shifted from brand ideas to the proposed position. Lily had asked whether the title was definite. Mom wrote that they still needed to finalize the business structure. Lily asked, What does Erica have to approve? Mom answered, Financing and some of the member paperwork. Your father is handling it. I stopped. Then came another email. Lily, what if Erica says no? Mom, she won't. Lily, you don't know that. Mom, I know your sister. She may complain about how we handled it, but she won't let the bakery fail. I stared at the words. Ian was across the room reading. I must have made a sound because he looked up. What? I motioned him over. He read the exchange. That's pretty clear. Yes. Not clear that Lily knew where the money had come from. Clear about something else. My consent had never been treated as an open question. It had been treated as a delay. Mom expected resistance. Dad expected negotiation. Lily expected uncertainty. But the plan continued because all three of them believed that when the moment became serious enough, I would eventually do what I had always done. The responsible thing. The practical thing. The thing that kept everyone else from dealing with the full cost of their choices. I scrolled further. There was one more message from Lily. Then, maybe don't tell her all the details until after the wedding. She'll be stressed enough. Mom responded with a heart emoji and one sentence. That's probably best. I leaned back. Ian looked at me. You okay? I thought about the question. Then I looked again at my mother's words. She won't let the bakery fail. And for the first time, I understood the assumption beneath everything they had done. They were not counting on me forgiving them. They were counting on me rescuing them. I asked Lily to meet me somewhere neutral, because I did not want Mom walking into the room halfway through the conversation, and I did not want the bakery around us turning every sentence into an argument about loyalty. We chose a small cafe near German Village, the kind of place where nobody cared who your family was as long as you ordered something before sitting down. Lily was already there when I arrived, a glass of iced tea in front of her, and one hand resting low over her stomach. She looked tired. Pregnancy had softened some of the sharper lines in her face, but not her expression. She watched me sit down and said, Please tell me you're not going to pull out a binder. I don't have a binder. That's not a no. I brought 4 pages. She closed her eyes. Of course you did. I almost smiled. There had been a time when that exact exchange would have been affectionate. When Lily was 19 and had just been dumped by a boyfriend she thought she would marry. She called me at midnight because she did not want Mom turning the breakup into a family emergency. I drove over with takeout and found her sitting on the floor beside her bed with mascara all over her face. She had spent 2 hours telling me every terrible thing the boy had ever done, then another hour defending him. At 3 a.m, she asked me whether I thought she was stupid. No, I told her. I think you're 19. She threw a pillow at me. For years after that, whenever one of us was overreacting, the other would say, You're being 19. We had not used that joke in a long time. I put the 4-page summary on the table, but did not slide it toward her yet. I'm not here to make you explain every expense. That's comforting. I mean it. She studied me. What do you want? I want to know what you're going to do now. About what? Caldwell Beginnings. Her shoulders tightened. I don't know. Yes, you do. You don't get to tell me what I know after apologizing for doing exactly that. She was right. I nodded. Fair. That took some of the fight out of her. I continued. Then let me ask it differently. Do you still want the creative director job? Lily looked out the window. That depends on whether there's still a job. That's not what I asked. She gave me a tired look. You really love that sentence. I use it when people answer a different question. Maybe because your questions aren't as simple as you pretend they are. They're usually pretty simple. No, Erica. You make them sound simple. Then if somebody doesn't answer exactly right, you act like you've proven something. That landed because there was some truth in it. I folded my hands on the table. Okay, what am I missing? She seemed surprised that I asked. Then she leaned back. You want me to say I don't want the job anymore because Mom and Dad handled the money badly. I want you to tell me what you actually want. I want something that is mine. I looked at her. She continued before I could speak. You have no idea what it is like being your sister. That's probably true. You always had a plan. College, work, promotions, buying your house, investing in the bakery. Even when things went wrong, you had another plan. Mom and Dad talk about you like you're the competent one. Everyone does. That hasn't always felt like a compliment. At least it's something. I said nothing. Lily pushed her glass around the table. I'm the one who changes jobs. I'm the one who comes back to the bakery. I'm the one Mom has to help. I'm the one everybody worries about. You think I like that dynamic? I think you like being the person nobody has to worry about. That hit harder than I expected. Sometimes, I said. Lily blinked. I continued. Sometimes I do. Sometimes being competent is easier than admitting I need anything. Sometimes I'd rather solve a problem myself than risk somebody doing it badly. She stared at me. And sometimes, I added, I probably make people feel judged when I think they should have handled something better. You do. I know. She folded her arms. That doesn't make the rest of this okay. Her expression closed slightly. I knew that was coming. It has to. Why? Because me being difficult doesn't make my ownership available. Me having more stability doesn't make my consent optional. She looked away. I finally slid the 4 pages across the table. I'm not asking you to choose me over Mom. Lily did not touch the papers. I'm asking whether you still want the job now, that you know how they plan to pay for it. Her eyes dropped to the summary. The first page was simple. Proposed expansion cost, proposed loan, my guarantee listed as an assumption. Her compensation package. The second page summarized the review categories without pretending every dollar was improper. The third showed cash impact. The fourth showed the specific decisions requiring member approval. Lily read quietly. Then she said, They can fix the classifications. Some of them. Dad said they can. Some can be reclassified. Some can be treated as compensation or related party transactions. Some may need accounting or tax correction. That's not the same as saying nothing happened. I didn't say nothing happened. Then what are you saying? She looked at me. I'm saying the company isn't broke. No. And you're not broke. No. And the money can be put back. Some of it. So why does this have to become a war? I sat back. There it is. What? The part where the amount I can survive losing becomes the measure of whether it was wrong. That is not what I said. It's what you're saying. No, I'm saying nobody was trying to destroy you. I know. You keep talking like Mom and Dad did something to you personally. They used company money in ways they did not disclose while asking me to leave more cash in the company. They built a $640,000 expansion around your future role and my future guarantee. They decided I would eventually say yes before they asked me. That is personal enough. Lily shook her head. You make everything sound so clinical, and you make everything sound harmless if nobody ends up homeless. Her face hardened. That's not fair. Neither is what you're asking me to accept. She pushed the papers back. I didn't ask you to accept anything. Then answer me. Do you still want the job? She hesitated. Yes. I let the answer sit between us. Not because I was shocked, because I wanted to be certain I heard it without rewriting it. You still want it? Yes. Knowing the expansion depends on my approval. Yes. Knowing the financing model assumed my guarantee. Yes. Knowing some of the money used to support you came from the same company Dad told me needed to preserve cash. Yes, Erica. She sounded irritated now. Why? Her eyes flashed. Because I am tired of everything becoming a test I have to pass before I deserve anything. This is not about deserving. It is always about deserving with you. No. Yes. You want everything justified. Salary justified. Help justified. Expenses justified. You have to know why somebody earned something. In a company I own, yes. She laughed bitterly. Exactly. That's not the insult you think it is. To you, maybe not. I looked at her. Lily, if Mom and Dad want to give you $20,000 from their personal account tomorrow, I can think it's a terrible idea and still have no vote. If the company wants to pay you $92,000 and open a third location around your role, I do have a vote. You keep saying the company like it isn't our family. It is both. That's easy for you to say. You already got your piece. I went still. What does that mean? You're 34%. I bought it. I know. With $180,000. I know. You're saying that like it was handed to me. I'm saying you had the money to do it. I stared at her. So because I had capital and took the risk, that makes my ownership less legitimate? That is not what I said. It's getting very close. She rubbed her forehead. I'm saying you already have everything. There it was. Not everything literally. The emotional argument underneath everything. You have the career. The house. Ian. Investments. Equity. You don't need this the way I do. I felt something inside me go quiet. Not angry. Quiet. That is exactly the problem. What is? You think need creates a claim? No. Yes. You're twisting it again. Then help me understand. She leaned toward me. If Mom and Dad help me build something that could finally give me stability, and you can afford to take a smaller distribution for a while or back the loan without it changing your life, why wouldn't you? I looked at her for several seconds. Because it is not your decision to make about what changes my life. She sighed. You know what I mean. I do. That's why I'm answering carefully. She looked frustrated enough to cry. I'm having a baby, Erica. I know. I need stability. I know. I cannot keep bouncing between roles at the bakery forever. Then build a role that can survive scrutiny. She stared at me. You make everything sound like a performance review. No. I'm saying if Caldwell Beginnings is a good idea, it should still be a good idea after everyone sees the full numbers and approves it properly. And if you say no, then the answer is no. Her mouth fell open slightly. That easy? No, not easy. It sounds easy. It isn't. You won't lose anything. I actually flinched. She saw it. What? Say that again. I said you won't lose anything. If I guarantee $450,000 of new debt, I take risk. Not if the business succeeds. Risk exists before you know the outcome. You know what I mean? No, Lily. I don't think you know what you mean. She pushed her chair back an inch. This is why nobody wants to talk to you about money. I almost laughed. Because I understand what guarantees are. Because you turn every conversation into a lecture. I took a breath. She was angry. I was angry. That did not make either of us more accurate. So I lowered my voice. Let me try one more time. She folded her arms. I am not asking you to reject a career because I'm mad about a wedding cake. I am asking whether you are comfortable taking a role built on a project that your parents intentionally kept from one owner until they believed it would be too difficult for her to refuse. Lily's eyes moved away. You were going to find out, after enough had been committed. Maybe. After the wedding. Yes. Because Mom thought I would complain, but ultimately save the bakery. Lily said nothing. You read that email too. I did. And you still want the job? She looked back at me. Yes. I nodded. Something in her face changed, as if she had expected a fight and was unsettled by not getting one. Then she said the sentence that ended the argument for me. You'll get the money back eventually. And you don't need it like I do. I stared at her. Do you hear yourself? Her face went red. That's not what I meant. It is exactly what you meant. No, I meant you're in a better position. That is a different sentence. You know what I'm saying. Yes. You're saying taking from me is less wrong because I can absorb it. I'm not saying taking. What word do you want? Helping. With whose consent? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I gathered the 4 pages and put them back in my bag. Lily looked suddenly frightened. What are you doing? Leaving. That's it? Yes. You drag me here, interrogate me for an hour, and now you leave because I didn't give you the answer you wanted? No. Then why? Because I got the answer. She stared at me. I stood. I was wrong about one thing. Her expression changed. I was wrong when I assumed you knew where all the money was coming from. You didn't. I apologized for that, and I meant it. I put my bag over my shoulder. But now you know enough. Her eyes filled. So that's it? You're cutting me off? I didn't say that. You're acting like I chose something terrible. You chose to keep benefiting after you understood the problem. That doesn't make me a bad person. I didn't say it did. Then stop looking at me like that. I softened my voice. Lily, I love you. That is not the same as agreeing with you. She looked down. I left before either of us said something designed only to hurt. My phone rang before I reached my car. Mom. For one irrational second, I wondered if Lily had called her already. I answered. What? Mom ignored my tone. The lender moved the timetable. I unlocked my car. To when? They want confirmation by Friday if we expect them to keep the current terms. That's fast. It's the site deadline. I know. Your father says you're still reviewing things. I am. Well, we need your answer. I got into the driver's seat and closed the door. Mom continued. Erica, whatever is going on between you and Lily cannot decide the future of this business. I looked back through the cafe window. Lily was still sitting at the table. This is not about a fight with Lily. Then prove it. There was the challenge. The old one. Be reasonable. Be practical. Be the one who absorbs the pressure because you can. I started the car. Fine. Mom went quiet. Fine what? You'll have my answer by Friday. For the first time since the wedding, I already knew what it was. By Thursday morning, I had stopped thinking about whether I was going to sign the guarantee. I wasn't. What I still needed to know was what that decision would actually do. There was a difference between refusing to finance Caldwell Beginnings and detonating Caldwell Bakehouse, and I was not willing to let Mom turn those into the same thing just because guilt worked better when 30 employees were standing behind it. Rachel had already finished enough of the review to build a clean base case model. I met with her before work, along with a financial advisor she sometimes used for small business forecasting. I brought coffee, my operating agreement, the lender packet, and a list of questions. Rachel glanced at the list. You numbered them. There are only 12. That was not criticism. It sounded like criticism. She smiled. Let's start with the one I think matters most. If Caldwell Beginnings does not open, the existing business does not automatically fail. I leaned forward. Walk me through that without making it sound nicer than it is. That is already the version without decoration. She turned her laptop toward me. The 2 current locations were profitable enough to support themselves if management stopped treating expansion expenses as inevitable and tightened discretionary spending. Catering was healthy. Existing debt service was manageable. Payroll was not dependent on the new loan. The biggest immediate loss from walking away would be the site option, planning fees, and some professional costs already spent. Worst reasonable case? I asked. If they cancel now and manage cash properly, there is pain, not collapse. Layoffs? Not required by the base case numbers. Reduced hours? Possibly if management chooses to protect cash aggressively, but not because the business is unable to make payroll. Existing bank debt? Serviceable. Vendor obligations? Serviceable. Any covenant breach if the expansion dies? Not based on what I've reviewed. I sat back. There it was. The sentence my parents had worked very hard not to say. Caldwell Bakehouse did not need Caldwell Beginnings to survive. It needed Caldwell Beginnings to grow the way they wanted. Those were completely different stakes. Rachel clicked to another tab. If they proceed with the expansion, the risk profile changes materially. Build-out, launch costs, ramp-up, debt service, working capital pressure. That doesn't mean it's a bad project. It means it is a project. And the guarantee? Real exposure. I know. I'm saying it because your father may keep describing it as routine. He already has. A lender asking is routine. Signing is still a decision. That distinction had become almost therapeutic. The bank asking for my guarantee was normal. My parents assuming I would provide it was not. I looked at the staffing model again. What happens to employees if I say no? The advisor answered. They continue working at the existing business. No hidden assumption? No. No planned payroll expansion already embedded? Not in the base operation. What about people Mom and Dad told they might move into the new concept? Rachel shook her head. Potential future roles are not current jobs. I nodded. That mattered too. If someone had already resigned from another job based on a signed employment offer, that would have been different. Nothing in the records showed that. There were planning names, staffing ideas, and a few informal discussions, but no executed hiring commitments for the new location. I wanted the answer because I knew exactly what Mom would do if I refused. She would say I chose paperwork over people. I needed to know whether that accusation had any factual spine. It didn't. After the meeting, I called the business attorney who had helped structure my investment 4 years earlier. His name was Daniel Price. He had the same operating agreement I did, but I sent him the current version anyway and asked for one specific thing. I don't want you to tell me how to punish anybody, I said. I want to know what I can and cannot do. Good place to start. I own 34%. My parents own 66%. They manage ordinary operations. What happens if I refuse approval for the expansion? He took me through it carefully. The 75% threshold applied exactly where I thought it did. A new location. New debt above the agreed level. Capital commitments above the threshold. A related party compensation package of Lily's size. Mom and Dad could not reach 75% without me. That did not give me control of the bakery. It did not let me fire Mom. It did not let me install myself as managing member. It did not let me demand that Lily disappear. And it definitely did not let me force my parents to buy my interest. What about the books? I asked. You have inspection rights. I'm using them. Good. Can I require corrections? You can insist company records comply with the agreement and applicable accounting and tax requirements, but the mechanism depends on the category. Your CPA and tax people handle classification questions. If management refuses required disclosure or violates the agreement, that becomes a different legal issue. Don't jump there unless you have to. I don't want litigation. Then don't lead with litigation. That was why I had called him. I wanted boundaries, not a weapon. So my leverage is basically this, I said. They can keep running the existing bakery. They cannot do this expansion under the current structure without my consent. That's a fair summary. And if I want out, you can propose a negotiated buyout. They don't have to agree. No, I can't force it. Not based on what I'm seeing here. Good. Daniel laughed softly. Most clients sound disappointed when I tell them they can't force something. I don't want an ending that only works because I misunderstood my own rights. That puts you ahead of a surprising number of business owners. By the time I hung up, I knew what I was going to offer. Not an ultimatum. Options. That afternoon, I took every document I had and rebuilt the story from the beginning. Not emotionally, chronologically. The first Caldwell Beginnings expenses appeared before the wedding. Brand research. Photography. Social planning. Small consulting items. Then came the gender reveal. Promotional event Caldwell Beginnings. The same weekend, my wedding cake had been rerouted out of my reception. After that came site notes, preliminary build-out estimates, lender correspondence, Lily's compensation model, and the proposed guarantor list. I opened the pitch deck again. The phone photos bothered me less than they had the first time. Not because using my wedding backdrop had become acceptable, because I finally understood what they represented. Mom had not simply looked at Lily's pregnancy and thought, what a sweet family moment. She had seen a story. Lily as the young mother, Caldwell Bakehouse as the family brand. Baby showers, birthdays, milestones, a new customer base, a successor who looked good in photographs and actually wanted to be part of the bakery's public identity. And somewhere in that story was me, not as the face, not as the successor. Infrastructure, equity, credit, approval. The person who would object, demand documentation, complain about process, then eventually sign because she was not going to let 30 people lose jobs or let the family business fail. It was almost elegant. If you ignored the part where I had never agreed, I opened the email Lily had forwarded. This time, I read the entire chain instead of stopping at the message that had already heard enough. There were discussions about color palettes, launch videos, sample event packages, local parenting groups, and whether Lily should begin posting more pregnancy content on the Caldwell account. Then came the salary conversation. Lily had written that she did not want Erica picking apart the package before it was final. Mom answered that Dad wanted to wait until the lending structure was clearer. Then Lily wrote, maybe don't tell her all the details until after the wedding. She'll be stressed enough. I had seen that line before. What I had not focused on was what came 2 messages later. Lily asked whether delaying the conversation could cause a problem if I did not approve the compensation. Mom replied, your father will handle the business side. Erica gets angry when she feels left out, but she always does the responsible thing once there's a real decision to make. There it was again. Not forgiveness. Function. I had spent years interpreting responsible as one of the nicest things my parents believed about me. In that email, it sounded like a contingency plan. I kept reading. Lily had answered, I just don't want her killing this because she thinks you're doing too much for me. Mom replied, she won't. Once she sees the numbers, she'll understand why it makes sense. That one bothered me in a different way. Because the numbers were not necessarily terrible. That was the trap. Caldwell Beginnings might have worked. Lily's salary could be defended with market comparisons. The location could have succeeded. The bank might have been repaid. There was a version of the future where the project performed exactly as my parents hoped, and everyone looked back at my objections as unnecessary drama. That did not make the process acceptable. Good outcomes did not create consent retroactively. Dad should have understood that better than anyone. I closed the email and opened a new document. At the top, I typed, "Proposed paths forward." I wrote the first option carefully. Cancel Caldwell Beginnings in its current form. No new debt. No third location. No guarantee. No Lily compensation package. Complete review of related party spending. Correct accounting and tax treatment where needed. Formal written related party transaction policy. Stronger monthly reporting. Independent bookkeeping controls. Material member decisions handled under the operating agreement before commitments were made. I stared at the list. It sounded severe, only if you believed basic governance was punishment. Then I wrote the second option. Negotiate my exit. Independent valuation. No invented family number. No discount because Mom thought I was being difficult. No premium because I was angry. If we could agree on value and payment terms, Mom and Dad could buy my 34% personally and run the bakery without me. I read both options twice. Neither was revenge. That surprised me. I had imagined that by the time I reached this point, I would want something dramatic. I would want Mom publicly embarrassed the way I had been embarrassed. I would want Dad forced to admit he had known. I would want Lily to lose the title before she ever got to print it on a business card. Instead, what I wanted was cleaner. I wanted the rules to become real. Either I was an owner whose consent mattered, or I wasn't going to remain an owner. Ian read the proposal that evening at our dining table. He got to the end and looked up. "This is your angry version? This is my reasonable version. Should I be afraid of the angry one? There isn't one." He kept looking at me. "What? You're disappointed." "No." "Yes, you are." I closed my laptop. I thought I'd feel more satisfied. By what? Having an answer. You don't have the answer yet. I know what I'm doing. That's not the same thing. He pushed the papers back toward me. You still want them to look at this and say you're right. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Ian nodded. That's what I thought. I don't need them to say I'm right. You do a little. I looked away. He was right. Part of me still wanted Dad to read the CPA summary, look at the emails, look at the lender assumptions, and say, "Erica, I understand now. We crossed a line." Part of me wanted Mom to admit that replacing my cake had not been sharing. It had been taking. Part of me wanted Lily to call and say she had thought about what she told me at the cafe and realized how ugly it sounded. That part of me was still waiting for emotional repayment. The practical part had already moved on. "Maybe I do," I said. Ian nodded. "What happens if they don't?" "I still don't sign." "There you go." The next morning, I sent the proposal to Dad and copied Mom. I did not copy Lily. This was a member decision. The email was short. "I've completed enough review to make a decision on the expansion. I will not guarantee the Caldwell Beginnings facility or consent to the current expansion structure. I've attached 2 paths I'm willing to discuss. Existing operations can continue under either." Mom called 8 minutes later. I did not answer. Dad called 20 minutes after that. I did. He sounded controlled. I read it. "Good. You're not signing." "No. Even if we fix the related party classifications." "No. Even if Lily's package is independently benchmarked." "Not under the current project." "Why?" "Because the problem is larger than the salary." He was silent. Then he said, "You know the site option dies." "I know. You know we lose money." "Yes." "You know the bank may not hold these terms." "Yes." "And you're comfortable with that?" I didn't say comfortable. What would you call it? Preferable to signing a guarantee for a project built around approvals you assumed you would get later. Dad exhaled. "The company is not in danger." "I know. That should make you more willing to invest, not less. It makes me less willing to accept the argument that I have to sign to save the bakery." He went quiet. I continued. "The base business survives without this." "Barely. if you keep forcing cash back into reserves, then rebuild reserves. You make that sound simple. I didn't say simple. I said possible. He was quiet long enough that I knew he was reading the proposal again. Finally, he said, "Independent controls? Yes. You want someone looking over our shoulders every month. I want material-related party spending visible before it becomes a 3-year pattern. Janet will never agree to this. That's her choice. And if she doesn't, then we discuss the second option. You expect us to buy you out. I expect nothing. You can say no. And then what? I remain an owner. Caldwell Beginnings does not proceed under the current structure. We follow the agreement." Dad's voice hardened. "You're willing to walk away from the bakery over this?" For weeks, that question would have made me defend myself. Explain how much I had invested. Explain that I cared about employees. Explain that I had not started this. Explain that I was not punishing Lily. I did not feel the need anymore. "No," I said. "I'm willing to stop being the reason you think you can do it." Dad did not answer. For the first time since my wedding, neither did I. The meeting happened the following Monday, in the small conference room above Caldwell Bakehouse's original location. Dad had asked whether we really needed everyone there. I told him yes. If the conversation was going to decide whether Caldwell Beginnings died, whether I stayed in the company, and whether 3 years of related party spending had to be corrected, I was done having separate conversations where everyone heard a different version afterward. Ian came because I wanted him there, not because I needed him to speak for me. Rachel joined by video from her office with the final classification summary open in front of her. Mom arrived 10 minutes early, dressed as if she were going to meet a client. Lily came last, wearing a Caldwell badge clipped to the pocket of her cardigan. I noticed the badge because she almost never wore it outside the bakery floor. It had her name under the Caldwell logo and, beneath that, Brandon Social. She touched it once while she sat down, a nervous little motion I had seen her make with necklaces and rings since she was a teenager. I wondered whether she had worn it deliberately, as a reminder that the bakery was part of her identity too. I did not ask. By then, I was trying very hard not to assign meaning before someone gave me evidence. Dad had printed my 2-option proposal. There were copies in front of every chair. Mom had written notes in the margins of hers before I arrived, underlining phrases like independent controls and related party policy so aggressively that the paper had torn in one place. She did not say hello when Ian and I sat down. She looked at Rachel's face on the screen, then at the financial advisor beside her, and said, "Are we really doing this like some corporate investigation?" Rachel answered before I could. "I'm here to explain the transaction review and answer questions about classification. I'm not investigating your family." Mom looked at me. "You see, even she knows how ridiculous this is." I heard something different. Dad lifted a hand. "Can we please get through the numbers before this turns into another fight?" "That's exactly what I want," I said. He opened the cash flow model and began. He had prepared carefully. I recognized the strategy because I would have used it myself in a difficult operations meeting. Start with common ground. Establish what is working. Move to the decision only after everyone has acknowledged the costs of saying no. He went through current revenue, booked catering events, payroll obligations, existing debt, and the performance of both stores. Then he walked us through the expansion case again. He showed what Caldwell Beginnings could add if it reached its target event volume. He showed the landlord allowance. He showed the bank terms. He showed a revised version of Lily's compensation that added clearer performance metrics. None of it was nonsense. That was the hardest part. If Dad had put garbage on the table, I could have dismissed him. Instead, he put forward a project that might make money. "We've tightened the launch assumptions," he said. "We delayed 2 discretionary hires. We reduced the first-year marketing budget. Lily's bonus would be tied entirely to performance. If we make the accounting corrections Rachel recommends, there is no reason this project cannot move forward." I looked at the model. "There is one reason." Dad's jaw tightened. "Your guarantee. My approval." "Fine, your approval. And the location approval." "Yes. And the debt approval." "Yes, Erica. We all know the agreement by now." Mom made a small sound of irritation. Dad ignored her and continued. The bank's current terms expire this week. The site option follows shortly after. We've already lost time. If we walk away now, we lose the site, we lose the option money, and we lose work we've already paid for. That may be acceptable to you, but I want everyone in this room to understand it is not free. I understand that. Do you? Yes. Because your proposal makes canceling the project sound almost painless. No. It makes clear that canceling the project does not kill the existing company. Dad leaned back. I never said the company dies. You repeatedly talked about protecting the bakery, as if refusing this expansion endangered payroll. I said there are consequences. And there are. About $15,000 in option and preparation costs, plus sunk professional expenses. A missed opportunity. Possibly worse terms if you try again later. And growth. What about it? We lose growth. I nodded. Yes. Dad looked almost frustrated by how easily I agreed. I continued. But none of that changes the question. Is the base business viable without Caldwell Beginnings? He glanced toward Rachel. She answered calmly. Based on the records we reviewed, and assuming management controls discretionary spending and rebuilds cash reserves, yes. Mom folded her arms. That assumes we stop investing in anything. Rachel shook her head. No. It assumes you do not commit to this $640,000 expansion right now. Mom looked away. Dad closed his folder halfway. Let's stop pretending this is purely financial, he said. It isn't. I looked at him. I agree. That surprised him. He glanced at Mom and then Lily. I said, the financial question had already been answered. Canceling Caldwell Beginnings would cost us money, but it would not destroy the existing bakery. The harder question is why you built the project around approvals you did not have. Mom exhaled loudly. We knew we would need your vote. You knew you would need my vote, and you kept going anyway. We kept planning. You spent money. Planning costs money. You coded my sister's gender reveal at my wedding as a promotional event. Mom's face changed. There it is, she said. The cake again. This stopped being about the cake weeks ago. You say that, but every conversation somehow comes back to your wedding. Because that is where I first saw the pattern. What pattern? I looked at her, taking something I had not offered because you had already decided I could afford to lose it. Mom pushed her chair back slightly. That is incredibly dramatic. No, it is incredibly specific. You had a beautiful wedding. I did. You had the ceremony you wanted. Yes, you had the flowers, the venue, the music, your husband, your friends. Yes. And Lily got a few minutes. I waited until she finished. Do you hear yourself? Mom stared at me. I continued. You keep listing everything I had as evidence that one thing was available for you to take. I did not take anything. You moved my cake out of my wedding because you knew I would say no if you asked. It was a cake. And now it's a loan. Mom's mouth closed. That is why it matters, I said. The amount changes. The logic doesn't. Dad stepped in before she could answer. This is exactly what I was afraid of. We are talking about a commercial expansion, and you are turning it into a metaphor. No, I am identifying a decision-making pattern. Then identify mine. I looked at him. You knew the related party spending was happening. Some of it. You knew enough. Yes. You thought future growth would let you clean it up. I thought stronger cash flow would make the corrections easier. You thought a good future outcome would make the bad process matter less. Dad's face hardened. That is not fair. Then tell me what I'm missing. He was quiet. I waited. He looked down at the table. I was trying to keep the company moving. That's not an answer. I was trying to keep 30 people employed, 2 locations operating, your mother from panicking every time cash tightened, and your sister from falling apart every time something in her life went sideways. Lily flinched. Dad noticed. Sorry, he said. She looked down. I leaned forward. And what did you expect from me? Dad's eyes came back to mine. You were the one person I didn't have to worry about. The room went still. There it was. Not cruelty. Not hatred. Something almost worse because he thought it was praise. I held his gaze. That was never permission. I know. No, I don't think you do. Dad rubbed the edge of his legal pad. I knew you would be angry. About the spending? Yes. About the project? Yes. About Lily's package? Yes. And when were you planning to tell me the full package depended on the expansion loan and my guarantee? He looked toward Mom. I noticed immediately. Dad. After the wedding. I stared at him. When after the wedding? When you got back. From the honeymoon? Yes. Why? Because you were getting married, Erica. You were discussing financing 3 weeks before the wedding. We didn't want to dump it on you then. But you were comfortable using the wedding as part of the launch. Mom cut in. Stop saying launch. It was a family reveal. I turned toward her. Then why did you put it in the Caldwell Beginnings project code? We needed somewhere to put the expense. And why did the pitch deck call it an early brand validation? Mom's face went red. That wording came later, after you had the photographs. It was a useful example of my wedding, of a family event. At my wedding, you make everything about ownership. And you make everything about family when ownership becomes inconvenient. Dad put both hands flat on the table. We were going to tell you. I looked at him again. After enough had happened, that saying no became more expensive. That wasn't the plan. Then why wait? Because we knew you might say no if you saw half-developed numbers. I almost laughed. So you waited until the numbers were developed enough that I would feel responsible for the sunk cost. No. Then explain the timing. Dad opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I nodded slowly. So you knew I might say no if I knew first. His shoulders lowered. I knew you might. Mom turned toward him. Douglas. He ignored her. I thought once you saw the full project you would understand. Understand what? That it could work. I do understand it could work. He looked genuinely confused. Then why are we here? Because viability is not consent. Mom pushed her chair back again. Oh my God. I looked at her. She had tears in her eyes now, but her anger was stronger. You would rather kill something good than admit your sister finally has an opportunity. Lily whispered. Mom. No, Janet said. I am tired of dancing around it. Erica has everything she ever wanted. She has a career, she has money, she has a stable marriage. She owns part of this company without having to work here every day. And Lily finally has something that fits her, and suddenly every rule in the world has to be enforced. I felt Ian shift beside me, but he said nothing. I asked Mom, why should the rules change because Lily needs something? Because she needs it. The words came out before she could soften them. Nobody moved. Mom seemed to realize she had said the quiet part clearly, but instead of backing away, she leaned into it. Yes, she said. She needs it. You don't. I looked at her. She continued. You have built a future for yourself. Lily hasn't. She is about to have a baby. She needs stability. She needs something she can grow into. She needs to know she has a place in this family business after your father and I are gone. So you built her one. Yes. With company money. With family money. It is not the same thing. It is to me. Of course it is. Mom laughed bitterly. Everything is a separate category to you. Your money, company money, our money, Lily's salary, your percentage, her benefits. Can't you see the larger picture for once? I see it very clearly. No, you don't. Then explain it. Mom pointed toward Lily. She needed a future. I heard something in that sentence that reached backward farther than the wedding, farther than the bakery investment, farther than any ledger. I remembered being 17 and sitting behind the bakery after my rejection letter. Mom handing me an overbaked cinnamon roll. Mom telling me one bad day did not decide who I was. I remembered all the times after that when she told me I would figure things out. I had thought she was describing my strength. Maybe she was. But somewhere along the way, confidence in me had become justification for not showing up for me. So did I said. Mom blinked. What? I needed a future too. You built one. Yes. Exactly. No, not exactly. I leaned forward. You keep saying I built mine as if that means nobody ever had to invest in me emotionally, financially, or otherwise. You kept calling it confidence in me every time you chose not to show up for me. Mom looked stunned. That is cruel. It is true. We were proud of you. I know. We trusted you. I know. You never needed us the way Lily did. That is not the compliment you think it is. Mom's voice broke. What was I supposed to do? Hold you back so things would be equal? No. You were supposed to stop taking from the child who stood on her own just because you thought she would stay standing. Silence filled the room. For the first time, Mom had no immediate answer. Rachel shifted on the screen. I think it may be useful to review the spending summary before this goes further. Mom wiped quickly under one eye. Fine. Rachel shared her screen. She did not dramatize anything. She walked through the classification exactly as she had with me. Some expenses had legitimate business support. Some had a mixed purpose and required clearer related party treatment. Some were personal and needed correction. She explained that the approximately $176,000 under review was not one giant pot of stolen money. She showed the categories and the cash impact across nearly 3 years. Lily stared at the screen. I realized then that she had never seen the full total. She had seen my 4-page summary at the cafe, but not Rachel's transaction breakdown. Rachel showed the apartment deposit, the photography, car support, furniture, travel, meals, maternity-related spending, marketing expenses that were legitimate, gray expenses that had some potential business purpose, personal charges that did not. Lily's face changed slowly. Not shock at one giant number. Recognition? She knew each thing separately. She had simply never seen them beside each other. That car payment, she said quietly. Mom told me Dad paid that. Dad looked down. Mom said, "It doesn't matter which account it came from." Lily turned toward her. "Yes, it does." I said nothing. Mom looked frustrated. "Lily, don't let Erica turn this into something it isn't." "What is it?" "We helped you." "With the company?" "Sometimes. You told me you and Dad were helping me. We are the company." I watched Lily's expression. There it was. The same sentence Mom had been using with me in different forms for weeks. Family and company became identical whenever separating them would create accountability. Lily looked back at Rachel's summary. How much of the personal stuff has to be paid back? Rachel answered carefully. That depends on how each item is ultimately treated by the company and tax professionals. Some may be compensation. Some may be member-related adjustments or receivables depending on the facts. I'm not here to assign repayment today. Mom pointed at the screen. See? Nobody even knows there's a real loss. Rachel stayed calm. That is not what I said. Mom ignored her. She looked at Lily. Your sister wants you to feel guilty for accepting help. I never said that, I said. Mom turned on me. You didn't have to. Then she looked back at Lily. This is what family does. We help each other. Lily stared at her. Mom leaned closer. Tell her. Lily frowned. What? Tell Erica this is what family does. Tell her you didn't trick anyone. Tell her you worked for that bakery. Tell her you deserve a future there. For a second, I saw the old dynamic trying to rebuild itself in real time. Mom wanted Lily on one side, me on the other, Dad in the middle. Then Lily reached up and touched the plastic badge clipped to her cardigan. She looked at it for several seconds. Her name, the Caldwell logo, brand and social. Mom followed her gaze. Lily. Lily unclipped the badge. Mom's expression changed. What are you doing? Lily placed it on the conference table. The small piece of plastic made almost no sound. I don't want it. Mom stared at her. Don't be ridiculous. Lily's eyes filled, but she did not pick the badge back up. If I take that job now, every paycheck is going to prove Erica was right. Mom stood so quickly her chair rolled backward. No, it proves you worked for something. Lily shook her head. Not this way. Lily, I said I don't want it. Mom looked at me as if I had reached across the table and taken something directly out of her daughter's hands. I hadn't. For once, I did nothing at all. For several seconds after Lily placed the badge on the table, nobody moved. Mom was still standing, one hand gripping the back of her chair. Dad stared at the badge. Rachel had gone very still on the screen. Ian sat beside me with his hands folded, watching the room without inserting himself into it. I looked at Lily. She was crying now, but quietly. Mom finally spoke. You are not throwing away your future because your sister made you feel guilty. Lily wiped under one eye. She didn't make me feel guilty. Yes, she did. No. You were fine with this project until she started showing you spreadsheets. Lily looked at Mom. I was fine because I didn't know what it looked like altogether. Mom shook her head. You knew we helped you. I knew you helped me. We did. You told me you and Dad were paying. We are paying. No, Mom, you keep saying that like the company and your checking account are the same thing. Mom looked stunned. It was almost strange hearing Lily say the exact distinction I had been making for weeks. She looked toward Dad. Say something. Dad did not look at her. Douglas. He exhaled. She's right about that part. Mom's face changed. Excuse me? The company is not our personal account. I know that. Then stop saying we are the company. I am not saying that. You just did. Mom looked from Dad to Lily and then to me. I could see what she believed was happening. Everyone was turning against her. That was easier than accepting that everyone had finally stopped agreeing to the same story. She pointed at me. This is what you wanted. I shook my head. No. Don't, Lee. I wanted accurate books, a real vote, and an answer about the expansion. You wanted Lily to lose this. No. You never thought she deserved it. I questioned whether she was qualified for the package. I also told Dad I would consider it if the role and compensation were supported. Mom laughed. You expect us to believe that now? It does not matter whether you believe it. That stopped her. For most of this, I had kept trying to prove myself innocent of the motive she assigned me. Not jealous. Not vindictive. Not punishing Lily. Not angry over just a cake. I suddenly realized I did not need Mom to approve my motives before I made a decision about my own risk. Lily pushed her chair back. I'm leaving. Mom stepped toward her. No, we're not doing this. Lily gave a broken laugh. What does that mean? It means you are pregnant and emotional, and you are not quitting your job in the middle of a family argument. I'm not quitting because I'm pregnant and emotional. Then sit down. Lily's expression changed. For once, Mom's command did not work. I said I don't want Caldwell Beginnings. You don't mean that. Yes, I do. You were excited about it. I was. You helped design it. I know. You told me this was the first time you felt like you had something Erica didn't control. Lily flinched. Mom realized too late that she had said that in front of me. I did not react. Lily looked at me, embarrassed. That was before. I nodded. She swallowed. I was angry. I know. I still am a little. I know. Mom looked between us. This is unbelievable. Lily picked up her purse. I need to go. Mom grabbed the edge of the table. Where? Home. Lily, please stop. There was something in her voice that finally made Mom stay still. Lily looked at me. I'm sorry. Mom closed her eyes. I did not say it was okay. I did not stand up and hug her. I had wanted an apology weeks earlier. Now that it was here, I understood how little a sentence could repair by itself. I believe you're sorry, I said. She nodded. Then I added, I don't trust you yet. Her face tightened. But she nodded again. I know. That response mattered more to me than the apology. She did not argue. She did not say I was cruel. She did not ask me how long I planned to punish her. She simply accepted that trust was not something she got back because she had finally reached the right conclusion. Then she left. The door closed behind her. Mom looked at me. Are you happy? No. She just walked away from a $92,000 job. It was a proposed job in an unapproved project. You cannot help yourself. What do you want me to say? I want you to admit this cost your sister something. It did. And you're fine with that. No. Then fix it. There it was. The request beneath everything. Fix it. Make the pain go away. Make Lily's future safe. Make Dad's expansion viable. Make Mom's decisions affordable. I looked at her. No. She stared at me. No? No. You could still sign. I won't. We could restructure Lily's role. I'm not discussing Caldwell Beginnings anymore. You cannot just decide that. I'm not. The operating agreement decides that. You have 66%. The project needs 75. Mom looked at Dad. Tell her. Dad's shoulders sagged. She's correct. You are really going to let this happen? Dad looked at her. What exactly do you want me to do, Janet? Convince her. I've tried. Try harder. He looked exhausted. Then something in him changed. Why? Mom blinked. What? Why am I still trying to convince Erica? Because this is our business. No, the existing bakery is our business. Caldwell Beginnings is a proposed expansion she does not approve. Mom stared at him. You wanted it too. I did. You said it was the future. I still think it could have worked. Then why are you giving up? Dad glanced at me. Because she is not signing. The simplicity of it seemed to offend Mom. You're acting like she has all the power. She has 34%. Stop with the percentages. Dad's voice rose for the first time. The percentage is why we took her money 4 years ago. Mom froze. So did I. Dad continued more quietly. We needed her capital. She asked for ownership. We agreed. We signed the documents. We cannot spend 4 years calling her an owner when we need the balance sheet to look stronger, and then call her our daughter when we want her vote not to matter. Mom sat down. For a moment, I could not speak. I had wanted Dad to say something like that for weeks. When it finally came, it did not erase what he had done. But it mattered. He looked at me. I should have told you earlier. I said nothing. About the spending. Yes. About the expansion. Yes. And about the guarantee? Yes. He nodded. I thought if the project was strong enough by the time you saw it, you would approve it. That was the problem. I know. Mom looked at him with disbelief. You're apologizing? I'm telling the truth. We were trying to help Lily. Dad turned toward her. And we handled it badly. Mom's eyes filled again. You too. He did not answer. She laughed once bitterly. Fine. Everybody has decided I'm the villain. No, I said. She looked at me. You made choices. Oh, thank you. That's much kinder. I'm not trying to be kind. I'm trying to be accurate. You think accuracy makes you better than everyone. No. I think accuracy is what stops us from having this same conversation 6 months from now. Mom looked away. Rachel cleared her throat gently from the screen. Before I disconnect, we should clarify next steps for the accounting review. Dad nodded. They discussed reclassification, documentation, related party policy, and what would need to go to the tax preparer. Nothing dramatic happened. No one announced federal charges. No one froze the business bank account. Some costs would be treated differently. Some would need support. Some, clearly personal items, would need to be accounted for properly. It was almost disappointingly ordinary. That was probably why it felt real. Consequences rarely arrive with sirens. Sometimes they arrive as corrected books, tighter controls, money you can no longer move casually, and people who stop accepting your explanation. When Rachel disconnected, Mom stood. I need air. She left without saying goodbye. Dad and I remained in the conference room with Ian. Dad looked at the 2-option proposal. I don't think Janet will agree to the first one, the governance option. Yes, because of the independent controls? Because she'll feel watched. She should be watched on related party spending. I know. He gave me a tired half smile. You really do not soften anything. I've tried softening things. How did that work? I almost smiled. Then he looked at the second option. The buyout. Yes. You want out. I want either real governance or out. You would stay if the controls were adopted? Yes. He seemed surprised. I thought you were done. I am done with the current arrangement. He looked down. If we buy you out, how fast do you expect the money? I don't know yet. You don't have a number? No. You usually have a number. I want an independent valuation. Dad leaned back. That could be expensive. So could guessing. He nodded. Fair. Ian finally spoke. This doesn't have to be decided tonight. Dad looked at him. No, but I think I already know. I waited. He folded the proposal. If Janet has to call you before every transaction she thinks might be related, party, she'll feel like she no longer owns her own business. She does own it. I know. But she doesn't own all of it. I know. Dad looked at me. I'll talk to her. 2 days later, he called. We want to discuss buying your interest. Not we agree to your price. Not we're buying you out tomorrow. Just a discussion. That was realistic. It was also enough. We hired an independent valuation firm. The process took weeks. They reviewed normalized earnings, debt, asset values, customer concentration, owner compensation, and the fact that my interest was minority ownership in a closely held company. My parents hired their own advisor to review the work. For once, I was glad they did. I did not want them agreeing to something and claiming later that I had taken advantage of them. We argued about adjustments. Dad thought the catering growth deserved more weight. The valuation firm thought some owner-related expenses needed normalization. Mom thought the entire exercise undervalued what the Caldwell name means. The appraiser politely explained that brand value was already reflected in earnings and future expectations, not in maternal sentiment. I wish I could say I did not enjoy that sentence. I did. Just a little. We eventually agreed on a value. I am not going to pretend the number made me rich. It did not. It was a fair value for my 34% interest based on the business as it actually existed, not the expansion that never happened. Mom and Dad did not have enough personal liquidity to hand me the entire amount at closing. I knew that. So we structured it. They used personal savings and other liquid assets for an initial payment, then signed an installment note for the remaining balance. The bakery did not redeem my shares. The company did not pay me with operating cash. Mom and Dad bought the interest personally. That distinction mattered to me because I was not going to spend weeks criticizing them for treating company money like personal money, and then accept exactly that structure when it benefited me. Dad made the first payment on time. He signed every page. Mom signed too. She barely spoke at closing. Caldwell Beginnings was canceled. The site option expired. They lost roughly $15,000 in option and preparation costs, plus some planning fees they had already paid. The bakery did not collapse. Nobody woke up unemployed because I refused to sign. The 2 existing locations continued operating. Catering continued. The bank kept the existing relationship but expected stronger reporting and better controls, especially after the related party corrections became part of the business's financial cleanup. Lily did not become creative director. There was no $92,000 salary, no bonus package, no gifted ownership. She stepped away from the bakery for the remainder of her pregnancy. Dad told me later that if she returned after the baby was born, it would be into a defined position with market compensation and clear responsibilities. I told him that was between them. For the first time in my life, I meant it. I did not need to supervise how they parented Lily once they stopped using my ownership and risked to do it. Mom waited until after the buyout documents were signed to confront me again. Of course she did. I was leaving the original bakery after one final paperwork meeting when I heard her call my name from behind me. Erica. I stopped in the parking lot. It was late afternoon, hot in the way Columbus gets in August when the pavement seems to hold every degree of the day. Mom walked toward me. She looked tired, not defeated. My mother did not know how to look defeated. I need to say something. I waited. She folded her arms. I was trying to make sure both my daughters had something. I looked at her. No. Her mouth tightened. No? You looked at what I built and decided there was enough to take from. That is not fair. It is how it felt. I never wanted you to lose anything. That was part of the problem. She frowned. What is that supposed to mean? You thought if I could absorb the loss, it did not count as one. I was trying to help your sister. I know. She needed us. I know. You keep saying that like it means nothing. It means a lot. It just doesn't mean everything else becomes available. Mom looked toward the bakery. This place gave you what you have too. No, this place gave me part of what I have, and I paid for my ownership. You are really going to reduce our whole life to a transaction. No. That's exactly what you're doing. I'm ending one transaction. She looked at me. The buyout. The role? What role? I had known the answer for months before I knew how to say it, making sure everyone else survives their choices. Mom stared at me. I continued. When Lily got into trouble, I was supposed to understand. When you spent company money on her, I was supposed to understand. When Dad kept it from me, I was supposed to understand. When you moved my wedding cake, I was supposed to understand. When the expansion needed my guarantee, I was supposed to be responsible. Mom's eyes filled. You make responsibility sound like something we did to you. No, responsibility is one of the best things about me. She went still. I'm just not letting you spend it anymore. For once, Mom had nothing to say. I walked toward my car. Behind me, she said, "You're really walking away from us?" I turned. "I'm walking away from the job you gave me." Then I got in the car. Ian was waiting in the passenger seat because we had come together. He did not ask whether I was okay. He had stopped asking that question every time I spoke to my parents because he knew the answer was usually too complicated for yes or no. Instead, he looked at me and asked, "Where do you want to go?" I looked through the windshield at Caldwell Bakehouse. The sign was the same one I had seen most of my life. I had memories inside that building that were still good. Mom teaching me to frost cupcakes. Dad letting me sit beside him while he counted receipts. Lily stealing chocolate chips out of the prep bins. My first summer job. The meeting 4 years earlier when I became an owner. None of those memories had disappeared just because the relationship changed. That mattered too. "Home," I said. He smiled. "Home it is." That was several weeks ago. It is August now. Ian and I have been married almost 5 months. Our wedding cake is no longer sitting in the Caldwell walk-in. Claire helped package it after the wedding. We froze the top tier like normal people do, although I have no idea whether I'll want to eat it on our first anniversary or throw it at a wall. Ian says both options remain available. Dad made the first buyout payment exactly when the agreement required. No message. No apology. Just the transfer. I saw it in my banking app one morning before work. For a moment, I stared at it. 4 months earlier, money had been the thing I thought I needed to understand. Who paid for the cake? Who paid Lily's apartment deposit? What did the company spend? What was my percentage? Who guaranteed what? By August, the money felt almost secondary. I closed the banking app and went to work. Dad and I speak occasionally. Mostly practical things. Mom and I are limited contact. She has not apologized in a way I would call complete. I am no longer waiting for one. Lily is due near the end of September. She has sent me a few messages. Nothing dramatic. A picture of the nursery. A question about whether a stroller brand was worth the price. Once, just a line that said, "I know you don't trust me yet." I'm not asking you to. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to understand why I said what I said. I answered, "Thank you for saying that." That was all. Maybe one day we will rebuild something. Maybe we won't. I have stopped treating reconciliation like another project I am responsible for completing. For a long time, I believed my family relied on me because they trusted me. There was truth in that, but it was not the whole truth. They also relied on me because they believed I would absorb the consequences. I would wait for the reimbursement. I would accept the smaller share of attention. I would understand why Lily needed more. I would forgive the cake. I would sign the guarantee. I would save the plan after everyone else had made the decisions. And the thing that finally changed my life was not getting them to admit that. It was realizing I could stop. I did not destroy Caldwell Bakehouse. I did not take Lily's future from her. I did not bankrupt my parents. I simply stopped making their choices safer by putting myself underneath them. For the first time, they had to carry the full weight of what they decided. And for the first time, so did I. The difference was that my decision finally belonged to me. When you are the reliable person in a family, people may start treating your strength as permission to give you less, ask you for more, or make decisions with your money, time, and resources without your consent. You should not confuse being capable with being endlessly available. Help is generous only when you choose it. Support is healthy only when everyone understands the boundaries. If someone keeps saying, "You can handle it," while expecting you to absorb the consequences of their choices, you have the right to stop. That does not mean you have to destroy relationships, seek revenge at any cost, or refuse compassion. It means you can ask for records, insist on clear agreements, say no to financial risk you never accepted, and let other adults take responsibility for what they decided. You should also be willing to correct yourself when the evidence changes, just as Erica did when she realized Lily had not known everything from the beginning. Being strong does not mean always being right. It means being willing to make a better decision once you know the truth. Protect your peace, your finances, and your future with the same care you give the people you love. Sometimes the healthiest consequence you can give someone is simply refusing to keep protecting them from the results of their own decisions. And if you enjoy stories about family boundaries, accountability, and people finally learning to stand behind their own choices, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for the next story.